Welcome everybody. We're here at RF Video, another exclusive. We're here today with Mike Graham. Mike, thanks for coming.
Thank you very much. It's glad to be here. It's always fun to see the wrestling fans and wrestlers and people that I've known all my life.
Good. You look great.
Thank you very much.
Okay, well, we're going to get right to the beginning. What was it like growing up as the son of Eddie Graham?
Whew. Well, I mean, in Amarillo, Texas, and then we moved to New York, and once kids at school found out who my father was, it was fighting continually, and my mom would have problems trying to go to the grocery stores, and it was very difficult. My father was a very disliked man in Amarillo and in New York, and it was hard. It was very difficult. That's why we moved to Florida, and he changed his career and style of wrestling and got involved with the Florida Sheriff's Boys Ranch and started doing community service stuff and everything so that the people would kind of leave us alone. And when they did say something, it was in a positive manner, you know, and it made it a lot easier, but it was tough. It was tough growing up like that.
You want to touch upon maybe why your father wasn't liked?
Oh God, he was a villain. He was bad to the bone. He and Dr. Jerry Graham was wrestling Don Curtis and Mark Lewin and all the good guys that were in New York, and he was, you know, they had the sequin gowns and bleach blonde hair, and he came from wrestling in Amarillo where violence and tough guy status was very important, and when he hit New York, it was like a hurricane. I mean, he was, you know, the Latin population didn't like him because he was beating all their local heroes and the crowds, and he always drove a convertible car. And I remember more than one time he would go someplace and the people would take knives. If they found his car, they'd cut the convertible top off of it.
Oh,
And he'd have to like go and get a park, try to hide his car, get in a cab and go to the building to work, and then try to sneak out so that people couldn't follow him to find out where he was parking his car so they wouldn't go the next week and cut his top off.
Oh, jeez.
So it was crazy.
Wow. How young were you when you started going to the shows with your dad?
I started going to wrestling matches when I was probably 10, 11, somewhere in there. I know I was wrestling amateur. I started wrestling amateur when I was 9, and going to the gym, and because that was kind of my time for my mom to have time for her to do stuff. Was my dad to take me to the gym to lift weights, teach me how to lift weights and work out and all that. Mm-hmm. And so I was probably around 10 when I started going to the matches.
Okay. Do you have any funny stories about people either, you know, eating dinner over your house or sleeping at your house? I'm sure that plenty did. I mean, anything, you know, the bizarre of really, you know.
Yeah, Dad was really, you know, he kept his family life private. I mean, we would have parties, you know, different wrestling promoters, Jim Crockett Sr., Vince McMahon Sr., Jim Barnett from Atlanta. Different promoters would come in town, and he would bring them to the house for meetings and stuff like that. And we'd be in the gym. We had a gym in our garage, so we'd be in the gym working out and everything. And he'd introduce different people to us and that kind of stuff. But pretty much kept his home thing separate from his business. You know?
Which I guess that was good for you guys.
Yeah. Home was home, and if he had business to attend to, whatever, then they would either go to the sportatorium, or I remember going out to the airport and getting on his airplane and flying down to Lauderdale on a pretty regular basis after the time I was about 17 or 18, going to see Vince McMahon Sr., talking about the wrestling in New York and what he thought of Dad's opinion of this wrestler was or that wrestler and all that kind of stuff. So it was pretty much home was home, and he took care of business when he was on the road.
When did you know that you wanted to be in the business? Was it from early or?
You know, I knew I wanted to be involved in the wrestling business when I was going to college. And I'm sitting at a restaurant and kind of low lights, and I had my girlfriend with me, and we're having a nice meal, and keep looking at the guy that's waiting on us. I'm thinking to myself, I know that guy from somewhere. When the dinner was over, it dawned on me it was one of my college professors. And I said, you know, I was like 18, and I thought, wow, this is, to me, that a college professor was supposed to be the epitome of intelligence. They were supposed to be the best. They were, you know, I mean, they could fail you or pass you, or they were like your thing. And he doesn't make enough money he's got to wait tables and want his students to give him a tip to survive. in there. I was promoting wrestling events and had a pocket full of money and everything else, so I pretty much knew then, I think I know what I want to do. I want to be somehow, some way in the wrestling business.
Well, that's good. So instead of waiting tables, I guess.
Yeah, instead of working a full-time job and waiting tables to have enough money.
Nothing's wrong waiting with tables.
No, but there he was, a college professor, best education, and had to wait tables because he couldn't make enough money.
Scary.
As a college professor.
When did your dad expose kayfabe to you?
He never really did. Jack Briscoe was the guy that I went down to the sportatorium and I trained with Jack for a couple months, and then Hero for a year. But Jack was the guy that talked to me and opened my eyes and exposed me to a lot of things in the wrestling business. He had been my coach in high school, Jack, when he came to Florida. I worked out with him a lot as an amateur before I turned pro. But and my dad just kind of acted like it never really happened. He just said one day I was an amateur, the next day I was a pro, and he didn't have to get involved in it.
Oh, sounds good.
Yeah.
When you were a kid, how did the other wrestlers treat you? Did they?
Everybody was always nice, my dad had a lot of respect from all the wrestlers and all the promoters. He was one of the first guys that made the crossover from back in the 50s. You either wrestled or you were a promoter, and you really didn't make that bond. But about the same time he was doing the thing in Florida, Fritz Von Erich was going into Texas, and Roy Shires, who was a wrestler, was going into California, and there were different wrestlers becoming involved in promotion. So he knew all those people, and he had a lot of respect from the wrestlers because he wrestled, and he had respect from the promoters because he did such a good job promoting and creativity and TVs and everything else. So, I was treated with a lot of respect wherever we went. Everybody was very nice because everybody liked my dad. He was a good guy. Good. Treated everyone very honestly and fairly, and he was a good guy.
In this business, which is not, that's a rarity, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
There was a time back when the steel window fell on your dad
at the National Guard Armory.
How did your dad was out for a year?
Yeah.
How did he take that? Being
No, he still went to after he was out really and home for probably a couple weeks, and then he had to fly to Houston, and it ripped the retinas in his eyes. And back then, laser surgery, because I was just out of high school, so I was 17. 68 maybe, because I drove my car to the hospital. I just got a call, said my dad was in the hospital. I really didn't know why, and so I'm laying on the stretcher. He was cut from eyeball to eyeball. The head was all swollen. Holy smokes, what happened? And he was home for a little while, but he immediately was getting up, going to the office, taking care of business, then flew to Houston and did the eye surgery where they took the laser because it hit him right across the forehead. His head went through the glass and the steel frame hit him here, and it put so much pressure that it made his eyeballs go long. Well, when it defigured his eyes at that moment of impact, the retinas tore. So he was blind in one eye. Gorgeous George blinded him in one eye. And so his good eye, then they were afraid would fill up with fluid and he would be blind. Oh. So that's when he made the decision to go to Houston and get the laser thing to seal up his eyes so that it wouldn't fill with fluid and eventually go blind. But that took a while. But still, he was going to the office and staying busy and, all that kind of jazz. Because back then we ran 7 towns a week. We wrestled every night. So there was something to do at the office every day. It wasn't, they just ran, twice a month or something. Mm-hmm. We ran 7 towns a night, 52 weeks a year. So he stayed busy in the office.
Before you got in, earlier on, maybe before you got in the business, did you ever sit on your dad's booking meetings ever?
No.
Well, that happened?
That basically happened once I started working out with, once my dad knew he wanted me to be in the wrestling business and he wanted me to wrestle, and I started spending time with Jack Briscoe and training with him and all that kind of stuff. That's then when I was allowed to go or sit in his office at a booking meeting or go with him to see Vince McMahon Sr. at his home in Lauderdale and stuff like that. But before then, no, I was never allowed to. I could go to the matches or stuff, but I was never allowed to be in any meetings or listen to any business or any of that kind of stuff.
Okay. Well, we're at an NWA convention right now, and it's a question I ask you: do you have any early memories of the NWA conventions that they used to do back in the day?
Oh, sure. Gosh, I started going to the National Wrestling Alliance conventions when I was about 13, and seeing all the Roy Shires and the Fritz von Erichs and all the different promoters from all the different places. And I guess I was kind of older than their kids, but younger than them, and they all used to give me cash to get their younger boys hooked up. So all the young guys from Kerry Von Erich to Don Owen's son, I mean, a bunch of them. I was kind of their mentor, their evening mentor, while the dads were with the wives out having dinner and doing that stuff. They would, come on, Mike, you're single. Here's some money, A couple of boys have a good time. Well, okay. So yeah, the National Wrestling Alliance meetings were a good time. A lot of fun.
Good. When you got into the business, did you feel immediate pressure of who your dad was, and you being his son? Was there pressure? How did you?
Oh yeah, I mean, here, I was. He prepared me. I was 5-time state AAU amateur wrestling champion before I turned pro. I was the first person in Florida to ever bench press 400 pounds at a 198 body weight in AAU competition. A couple of years later, I did a 455 at a 198 body weight, which were things. So I was strong. I could wrestle. He gave me all the tools to get as good as I could get before I turned pro. But even at that, the pressure really, and a lot of it came from him, because I wanted to do good for him. Because he was one of those guys that would sit on the railing at the Armory and watch everything I did. And when I came back to the dressing room, why'd you do this? Why didn't you do that? Why? Boom, 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 boom. No, you blinked your head. You let your head hang down too far. You should have kept your hands up. It was a constant school, of every night. Every night I loved going someplace where he wasn't going to be, because I knew I could go out, I could wrestle, I could come back, and it wasn't constant scrutiny.
Okay. What made your dad such a great booker?
That's one of those things that what made Barry Windham such a great wrestler at such a young age. What makes Brett Favre the guy? They have the it factor. He was around a lot of very, very smart men. Dory Funk Sr. and Doc Sarpolis and everything out in the Texas area in 1958, 59, 57, 58, 59, through that era. Then we went to New York. Of course, Vince McMahon Sr. was there, and he was very intelligent, very sharp promoter and marketing and different things. So he kind of took bits and pieces from all these people that he met and pulled out what was important to him, and then kind of molded them all together and came up with his own pattern, his own formula. I mean, he could sit in the dressing room and watch two guys walking around putting their tights and everything on and see something in them that he could get out of them in the ring. He could just watch people, and his ideas, his brain was constantly going, and he could always find something, some reason, good versus evil, big versus small, poor versus rich. He could always come up with a reason for two people to be in a contest against each other, and logical reason, and he had that knack about being able to do that. And a lot of other people see themselves as the star, and he never saw himself as a star. He'd work on the fourth match or the main event if he thought it was going to make money, or he would put himself on the card wherever he thought he could add the most to the card. So he was never greedy or selfish or any of that kind of stuff. And he just had a good overall look at it and was very honest and open with everyone.
Okay. Memories of training with Boris Malenko and Hero? And did he ever...
I never really trained with Malenko. I went to he had a training camp, and I went there one time, but I worked out with Carl Gotch.
Okay.
I never really trained with Malenko. Matsuda was 2-3 times a week for a couple years. And, he was an awesome athlete, awesome trainer. He I mean, he started probably the largest number of turned out to be very successful professional wrestlers, more than anybody in history ever did. From Hulk Hogan to Steve Keirn and Barry Windham and Kendall Windham and me and Paul Orndorff and Ron Simmons. And I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on and on. His students that have been very well known and very successful in the wrestling industry.
Did he ever stretch you?
Oh God, yeah. On a regular basis. That was, I mean, that you learned and you respected, and you gave you a little different outlook on everything when you knew somebody completely had the ability to hurt you or make you tap out and wasn't afraid to do it. So yeah, Jack Briscoe used to poke me in the chest when I was in high school. What's the matter, boy? Ain't you got no guts? I mean, I was just so tired and wore out. And what's the matter, boy? Ain't you got no guts? And just drive you and push you and drive you and push you. And we were coming back from a wrestling tournament. My dad's had learned to fly, and he rented an airplane. We had some real bad weather. Anyway, we wound up landing on the interstate in Melbourne, Florida. And Jack was terrified to fly. He hated flying. So we landed on the interstate, and we stepped out of the airplane on the ground. And I mean, Jack was just soaking wet with sweat. His hands were shaking. And, I mean, I was 17 years old. It was fun and exciting to me. I didn't think about what could have happened,
Right.
And so I saw my opportunity then. I poked him in the chest and went, what's the matter, boy? Ain't you got no guts? And he looked at me and he said, hell no, not when it comes to crashing in an airplane. So it was
Payback's a bitch sometimes.
Yeah, that was my little chance to get a shot back at Jack.
When you first started, did you ever think about hiding who you were?
No. Well, that would have been foolish. I mean, my gosh, I had seen a lot of my friends and their fathers were successful business people and everything, and the boys just went a completely other direction, and 99% of them were failures. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, if your dad spent 20 years doing something and you had a business and you had knowledge and you had everything there, why go do something different? Mm-hmm. Why fight it? I mean, I had a great opportunity, so I would have been crazy to go change my name or hide my identity or do anything else. That wasn't in the plan. That was never going to happen.
So when you first started out, did any you said your dad was well liked because he was a good guy and so forth, but were there any veterans took their anger out on you, get a little business to you because of your dad?
Yeah, not really. I mean, and I could take care of myself. A lot of the veterans that from the earlier days that might have had some animosity or something toward my dad was because they weren't as good as they thought they were. Mm-hmm. They probably believed their own advertising, and there wasn't too many of them that could beat me. So, I mean, if they came out and started playing, I was a player. Jerry Briscoe's about the only guy that every time I was in the ring with him, he was trying to leg dive me. It was quite fun, you might say, but no, I was always treated with respect, and everybody knew. My dad made it clear that okay, I was his son, but he wasn't in the ring with me. He gave me an opportunity, and I had the ability to take advantage of that opportunity. He gave a lot of people opportunities; they didn't have the ability. Mm-hmm. So I was always kind of my own person.
How about memories of that very first match and who against who?
Corsica Gene. My first match was my first match was my dad and I and Don Curtis at a Toys for Tots benefit, and we wrestled Eduardo Perez and two other guys, and I don't remember the other two, at a Marine training base in Tampa on Gandy, and it's still there. The building is still there. Yeah. And my second match, that was a tag match. My second match was a one-on-one, was against Corsica Gene in Live Oak, Florida, which was also a benefit. So I got to thinking, I might have not been too smart. My first two matches, I don't get paid for either one of them. I don't know if I'm really wanting to do this anymore or not. But the excitement, the adrenaline, and just breathing, and it was something. It was pretty cool.
How was the team with your dad then? If that adrenaline was flowing when you first, but how was it with your dad? Wasn't that just off the charts?
Yeah, I mean, it was a little. We got disqualified a lot and stuff. It was hard for him to stay on the apron if he thought I was getting hurt, or it was hard for me to stay on the apron if I thought he was getting hurt. The camaraderie between father and son is pretty intense, and it's a lot easier for me to stand and watch Kevin Sullivan or Steve Keirn getting beat up as opposed to my dad. So it had its good and its bad. I was always probably more nervous when my father was in the ring with me. I was always trying to do everything as good as I could do it, and until I got over that thing and just let myself start going and flowing, that's when I really started gaining leaps and bounds in wrestling and improving and feeling comfortable and just not getting tired anymore, and could wrestle an hour every night. Didn't bother me. So our closeness sometimes got in the way, but for most part it was okay.
Early memories of Vince McMahon Sr. Did you really have it?
Dressed immaculately, just a gentleman, true gentleman. He had a beautiful waterfront house in Fort Lauderdale right on the Intercoastal Waterway, and my dad would fly down, he'd pick us up at the airport, and just remember this big, robust, happy, smiling guy, and go to his house, and he'd have, little snacks and stuff, and Dad and him would discuss business, and that's how Bob Backlund got to New York. That's how Superstar Graham got to New York. That's how Hogan got to New York. That's how Dusty went to New York. All those guys was through my dad. My dad, when Bob Backlund was going to go up, Vince called him and said, "Daddy, man, I need a good athlete that can go to schools, that can talk to kids, that is a good public image." Dad said, "I got him right here. College educated, tremendous wrestler, good shape," and hence Bob Backlund. There went Bobby. Vince flew him to New York and did nothing but TV 1 year before he was ever seen live.
Really?
Yeah. So Vince took a lot of thought and everything to what my father said and ideas and suggestions that he gave him. But he was just always, and after the show in the garden, he'd go out to the restaurant and there'd be a table for 20, and he'd always sit at the head of the table, and all the people would come in, and Grill Monsoon, and the couple like my dad. Whenever my dad went to New York, he was always invited, myself, and he was just always such a gentleman, such a businessman, not the wild and crazy wrestlers that turned promoter. He was always very astute, very, very well dressed, very nice. He was a good guy. He was fun.
You mentioned Dusty Rhodes. Early memories of Dusty.
Mooning me in the dressing room. First time I ever met him and Dick Murdoch.
What kind of sight was that?
Oh, it was horrible. Oh my God. I was about 19 years old and it was in Fort Lauderdale. And I don't know. It was crazy. But yeah, him and Dick both took an immediate liking to me, and they'd take me out to the Imperial Room, different bars and stuff, and they were terrified that my dad was going to find out. So they would tell my dad, said, "Oh, we're just going to take Mike with us to the town." And my dad didn't know what was going on. He was the wild one. He was the wild one. He knew exactly. And they'd get the phone call at the Imperial Room. "Send Mike home. We know he's there with you." And they'd come back to the table. "You got to go." "Daddy just called. You got to go. Get out of here." So, but Dusty was just always so much personality, so much energy, just funny. And he was always the American dream. And he came up with a concept of the American dream, and he ran it by Dad and the son of the plumber and all that kind of stuff. And Dad said, "Hey, that makes sense. It's a blue collar thing and everything is good." And my dad and I was wrestling Dusty and Pac Song, and Gary Hart was their manager the actual night Dusty became the American Dream in Tampa. So I've watched Dusty from day one in Florida and his whole career.
I think since you were in that match, I think that could be an interesting story for the fans. That turn, the famous, he turned.
Yes.
Maybe you could just, for people who don't know,
right,
fill them in a little bit about that. Exactly what went down in that match.
Well, we were wrestling, and Dusty was standing on the apron. Pac Song was in the ring. My dad got over close to Dusty, and Dusty grabbed my dad to hold him from the outside. And when he did, Pac Song wound up to give Dad a big chop. When he did, Dad ducked. he hit Dusty and knocked him off the apron down onto the floor. And then my dad ducked around, and then he hit Dad. Anyway, Pak Song was on my dad, pounding on him. And Dusty, being Dusty, got mad because his partner had smacked him. He rolls in the ring and grabs Pak Song and starts punching Pak Song. And then Dad then gets up and he jumps on Dusty. And then I grabbed my dad and I'm going, no, he helped you. I mean, you know, because Dad was a little delirious. His head was bleeding and everything. So I grabbed my dad and no, Dusty came in and he got Pak Song. I'm trying to explain to him in the ring that he had come in to help my dad when Dad was in trouble. And so then they wound up shaking hands. That was like the handshake that was heard around the world, where Dusty and my dad shook hands. And
huge pop.
Oh yeah. And then the rest is history. Then it was the American. Then he had a long run wrestling against Pak Song. He wrestled Pak Song for a year, I think.
How about early memories of the late great Gary Hart?
You know, Gary was in the plane crash with Dennis McCord and Buddy Colt when Bobby Shane got killed. And he just was one of those personality, could talk, could do interviews. He was just an all-around, very compelling manager, and a lot of ideas. He was a good guy. He was fun. He was fun to be in the ring around, and had a lot to add to the matches, and knew his place out on the floor, when to get involved, when not to get involved. Didn't try to take away from the wrestlers, where a lot of managers try to make them the show instead of the wrestlers and them supporting the wrestler. Gary was always there to help the match, not to try to get all the attention to himself. So he was a very professional, very, very good guy.
How was it teaming with Mr. Kevin Sullivan?
We were both real young, and Kevin had wrestled some in Tennessee. I met him in 1972, and he wasn't quite the devil yet, but he was well on his way. Mm-hmm. And we spent a lot of time together again. You know, we trained together, we worked out together. We used to go to Heroes Wrestling School and wrestle amateur against each other. Just spent a ton of time with each other. Our families all got along. When he met me, my first wife was pregnant with my son, and then his wife got pregnant right after that. And so, I mean, we kind of went through life together as young guys, and I learned a lot. But he would go to other territories. He'd go to California for 8 or 10 months, and then he went up to Winnipeg for 8 or 10 months, and Tennessee, but he'd always come to Florida. He'd like go someplace for 8 or 10 months and come back for a year, and then go someplace and come back for a year. And, you know, where I just always stayed at home.
Was your dad? Did he come up with the whole devil and
Kevin? That was all Kevin.
That was all Kevin.
Kevin and gosh darn it, Kevin kind of looked up to and idolized. The big guy from Hawaii.
Mark Lewin.
No, Mark Lewin, but both Mark and Kevin looked up to, had bad scars on his head, horrible scars on his head. God, I can't believe we nicknamed him the King of Swing. His father was the chief of police of Hawaii. His son later wrestled for a little while. I'll remember. But anyway, King Curtis, Curtis A.K.A. King Curtis.
Okay.
And so Curtis was always on the crazy dark side, and always had wild ideas and stuff going on. And so I think it was kind of Kevin and Curtis and Lewin, and just traveling up and down. When you drove up and down the road every day, you know, your brain was just constantly going, thinking about things or a match or something. You know, you had to do something to entertain yourself. And Kevin was the one that started putting the X's on his head and darkening his eyes, and, you know, slowly slipped into the dark side of the devil.
Yeah, that was some TV. I mean,
oh my gosh! I mean, we had to repaint the Sportatorium a couple times a week. People were, you know, go back to Satan, go back to hell, and no telling what we'd come after TV and see written on the side of the building that was too vulgar to leave. We had extra paint and a handyman, and all right, go out and paint the side of the building. But that was the first of an era of stuff that was really wild and off the hook. You know, he did things that had never, the snakes and,
Right.
you know, all the...
Out of the water, coming out of the water.
Yeah, he just did a lot of really wild things. And
now, but all those ideas, everything was Kevin.
About everything was Kevin. Yeah.
Really?
Between Kevin and Lewin and King Curtis, the three of them, but most Kevin. That was all his thinking. That was his brainchild.
Oof. Yeah. Well, you mentioned seeing Dusty's ass, but how was it when wrestling Dusty and Dick Slater?
I wrestled Dusty and Slater. Well, Slater and I grew up together. We went to high school together. Went to junior high school together, and we wrestled on the same high school wrestling team and everything. And he was a tough human being. He still lives down in our area, and he broke his neck with WCW back in the early 90s, and doctors put pins in his neck. Then they took the pins out. Then they fused his vertebrae. Then they fused his lower vertebrae and had him on a morphine pump for 4 or 5 years. And doctors really ruined him. I mean, he's a good guy and everything, but he's too much morphine and the painkillers and the stuff to try to get through every day. Has just had a big effect of his life. But he was a tough son of a... He knocked all my cotton pick and folded all my teeth back. We were wrestling in Fort Lauderdale, and I don't know why, but he wanted to tag out, and I was between... My back was to his partner, and he just put his head down and dove. His head hit me right in the mouth, and all of a sudden my mouth wouldn't close. I couldn't close my teeth. I reached up, and all my front teeth had been folded back in my mouth. And I put my thumb in my hand, pulled all my teeth down, and then gritted my teeth and kept wrestling with my teeth gritted to keep them all in some kind of line. Wow. And then I went to the dentist the next day and broke my nose, knocked all my teeth out, or folded them all back. I went to the dentist the next day, told him what happened. He went, he felt to me, he looked, he said, everything looks pretty good, you just have to wait and see if you get any that turn black or whatever, we'll have to pull them out. And they all, everything firmed up and it was all okay, except my cotton picking nose has been broke a couple of times. That was the first time was Slater, dirty dog.
Dirty Dick Slater.
Yeah.
He lives by the name.
Yeah.
Did your dad ever want to send you out of Florida to get experience, or was he just happy keeping you there?
Well, he didn't want me to go through, I think, the hardship and hard times that he did, and dragging my mom and I all over the state and living in apartments and trailers, and I got married and had children at a young age. I was 21 when my son was born. My dad was 21 when I was born. And, he didn't want to see my family drug all over the place. And if you're going to go someplace else and wrestle, you got to give it a year or two. I mean, you just can't go for a weekend or something. And so, and I used to laugh because when I won the world's junior heavyweight title, went up to Minnesota, was wrestling Buck Zumoff and different guys. And they'd say, man, why don't you come to Minnesota and work up here and do this, do that, whatever. I'm going, leave Florida to come to Minnesota? Will you carry blankets in your cars in the winter because you might get frozen? Are you crazy? I'm in Florida, guys. Everybody wants to come to Florida. Why do I want to leave Florida? Right. I'm making, $750 to $1,000 a month. I was in my 20s. I was in the gym working out every day, laying in the sun. Life was good. I didn't want to go anywhere.
Hot TV.
Yeah, and as long as our business was doing good and everything was rocking along, heck, I didn't want to go anywhere. So no. He suggested a couple times that if I wanted to, but I said, Dad, I'm very comfy right here at home. Sleep in my own bed every night, not in and out of motels, and all that kind of stuff. So no, he never did really push to try to get me to go anyplace else.
Memories of wrestling the Ortons.
Ooh. Orton Sr. he was so awesome. I mean, he didn't do anything in the ring that was a wasted motion. I mean, he made everything count, every move, every step, his look, his demeanor, his everything. And that's what got his son in some trouble. Because his son, Bob Jr., I don't think kind of saw what his dad was doing in the ring. To him, it just looked like his dad wasn't doing anything. Mm-hmm. But when you look through that and watched, he was doing it all with very little movement, as far as registering and selling and facial expression and all that kind of stuff. And Junior was wrestling Dick Slater one night in Orlando, and it was horrible. I come back to the back, and Slater goes, "Hey man, I'm trying to earn a living just like you. What's your problem? What do you won't sell anything? You won't do anything?" Orton said something like, "Well, if you could do anything in real life that I would sell or something, then I would." Ooh, Slater hit him. I was standing in the dressing room talking to Orton Sr. I thought a bomb went off. The dressing room door flew open and hit the wall. And I ducked, figuring here comes all the building down or whatever. And I as I turned my head, Orton Jr. went sailing across the floor on his heels. I mean, it hit him so hard he went through the door and 10 or 12 feet across the dressing room, hit the wall, and just slid down the wall. Blood, knocked out. And here comes Slater behind him. Orton Sr. jumps in front of his son hey, Slater said, "I just kicked your kid's ass. I'm going to kick yours next if you don't get out of my way." Senior said, "Wait a minute now. I'm just trying to see what's going on here. He's knocked out. What else can you do to him,
Right.
And it's like, he was huffing and, Slater and back to Slater and Dusty.
Mm-hmm.
Dusty was always more of a easygoing, fun-spirited, comical kind of guy in the ring, where Slater was down to business. You had to be paying attention when you were in there with him.
Yeah.
So, but I only wrestled him one time over at the Bayfront Center in St. Pete, and it was quite a match. Yeah, it was quite a match.
Talking about we'll stay with the Ortons, Randy Orton. No, he's succeeded. He's doing well for himself.
I don't know Randy.
Mm-hmm.
Haven't had an opportunity to meet him one time, and it didn't go very well. I think he needs to meet a modern day Dick Slater.
Really?
Oh yeah.
So he's worse than I guess the lack of respect, would you say?
Yeah, just attitude. I showed him a picture of his father and myself when we were 14 years old with my mom.
The picture you carry with you.
And some other people. And he looked at it and he threw it down on the floor, just to throw it away. I mean, I was in shock. I couldn't believe he would do something like that.
With his own father in it?
Yeah, with his own father in it. So I don't know if he doesn't get along with his dad. I don't know. I haven't seen Bobby in years and years and years. So I just kind of blew it off. And Wade Boggs was sitting at the bar. Wade grew up in Tampa and watched me wrestle and everything. He jumped up. And I went, "No, easy, Wade, easy. No, it's all right. It's all right." I said, karma's a funny deal. I said, everybody that gets around and does that kind of stuff and has that attitude, and sure enough, 4 months later, he's out for a while. Motorcycle crash.
Karma's a bitch.
Yeah, karma will get you every time. So and I know he's young, and hopefully I wish him the best, and I've got a new baby and everything, and I hope everything comes out well. But he needs an attitude adjustment.
Okay. All right. Why do some second generation wrestlers make it? You made it, Randy Orton made it, but then you have other wrestlers who came from great fathers, David Sammartino and David Flair. Just
it's a funny business and bloodlines. I mean, you can take two brothers that were born a year apart, and they're two completely different people. One of them can be a very successful businessman and just everything going great and all that, and the other brother can be a drug addict and not be able to keep a job. So just because you have a name isn't a guarantee that you're going to be successful. You have to have the ability, you have to have the respect, you have to have everything else that goes with it. And some guys don't have the respect for other people. They never get respect from the other wrestlers. Don't have the ability. David Flair, God bless him, he's a great kid. I know him, but he just started too young. He was put in some situations that he was not ready for, and I think had a lot of resentment from some of the other guys. So when somebody resents you, well, you can be assured that if they can take advantage of you, they're going to. And I think he got a lot of problem instead of guys wanting to help him and that kind of stuff. Guys resented that he was getting an opportunity that they felt they should have had, and wouldn't help him and wouldn't talk to him and wouldn't do stuff. So sometimes it's just how you're used and how you're treated. But David's always a great kid. I mean, he was always very, very likable, very nice. But he had big rosy cheeks and great big eyes. He was like 17 or 18 years old and didn't look athletic and didn't look the part, much less know the part. So just some people make it, some people don't. In any walk of life, whether you're a policeman or a school teacher or anything, some do and some don't, and that's just the way it is.
In 1972, you won PWI Rookie of the Year. How was that for you? Did that help you catapult your career, or what? Did it really?
Yeah, I mean, it was really neat to be that young and to be in that league with some guys that were unbelievable. Gave me some credibility in Florida, and then I would go to New York and work occasionally, not too much. But in the magazines, back then, to be in a magazine was big time, because it was before cable TV, it was before all that kind of stuff. So the magazines were really the national publicity. So when people in Florida saw one of their Florida guys in a magazine that was going around the world, ooh, they thought, boy, look, we got a guy in the magazine. So sure it helped. Sure it made people respect and set me a little different than some of the other guys they just said, oh, those are just local guys in Florida, but your Mike's recognized nationally. So yeah, it helped.
Okay. Thoughts on the Hollywood Blondes?
Dick Slater and I wrestled against the Hollywood Blondes and Humperdinck, and Jerry Brown was giving Slater a little problem or whatever, and Slater reached up, just grabbed him by the head, picked him up, and just no wrestling move, no body slam, no, just reached out, grabbed him by the head, picked him up, pounded him off the mat, dropped down on top of him with his knees on his arms, and just looked at him with his fist balled up, and I'm screaming, "Don't kill him! Don't kill him!" And then he looked at me, and he got up and he puffed off of him, and tagged me. Went back in the dressing room when the match was over, and stupid Jerry, he thought he was, Slater was a young kid. He'd been around for a little while, and I guess he thought that he could manhandle him, whatever. Another knockout for Slater.
Tough son of a bitch.
Yeah. At Beach Week in high school, and I'm talking thousands of people, not just a couple high school kids. People from college, people from all over the state of Florida would go to Clearwater, Indian Rocks, all through that area for Beach Week when school would get out. Slater was the guy that you tried to beat. He was the man.
Really?
Yeah, he was the man. And he beat up college guys, high school guys. He didn't care. I mean, he hit like a cotton-picking horse. His senior year of high school, we had a wrestling team at school, so that's when he started learning how to wrestle, along with being able to hit. He played football, offense, defense. Once the whistle blew to start a football game, he never left the field. The offensive team would go off, he'd just stand there for the defensive team to come out. The defensive team would go off the field, he'd just stand there for the offensive team to come out. He was on special teams. He did everything. He never left the field. He played a solid football game with no rest.
Wow.
Offense, defense, special teams, everything. So he was just an incredible athlete. And then just everything fell in naturally. From the first time he got in the ring, he had it.
Another it man.
He had it. He was in a real bad car accident the first year he was in the wrestling business in Amarillo. Guy driving the car got killed, and Slater went out through the roof, and it scrambled his brain. He was a little slow after that. You could tell he'd really have to watch and pay attention to what you're saying and everything. It was real bad the first year or so after it happened, and then it kind of calmed down, and he got somewhat back to normal. But he was never the same guy again. That car accident hurt his head, and then this business is going to hurt your head anyway.
Yeah.
And just but he was just one of those guys, man. If he was your buddy, you were in. If he didn't like you, he's gonna let you know it, and there was nothing you could do about it.
Black and white.
Yeah. You didn't like it? Too bad. He was gonna rip your head off.
How about Superstar Billy Graham?
Soup was cool. Vern Gagne in Minnesota broke Wayne Coleman, his name, but anyway, broke Wayne in, and Vern called my dad, and he said, "Hey Eddie," he said, "we've got a guy out here, and big guy, looks good, can talk, he's tough, he's this, he's that," and he said he wants to be your brother. He wants to be a Graham. Is it okay with you? We would like to call him Billy Graham. So Dad said, "I appreciate you calling me and everything." And Vern, because my dad and Vern were very good friends, had been up and down the road together, he said, if you think he's, worthy and everything, then that's cool with me, if you want to use him at all. And so hence came Superstar Billy Graham. And but there's another guy. I mean, probably 9 of the top 10 money makers of the wrestling business were talkers.
Right.
Talkers. They didn't have amateur wrestling background. They didn't, they could talk. They could emotionally get inside your heart and soul and get you off your couch or out of your house or off your job or whatever and get you to pay your $7 or $8 to go to the live events. That's the way we made money back in the day, the live events. We didn't have TV. We weren't making any money from TV. TV was just a vehicle to advertise the live events 7 nights a week. And Superstar could talk. Oh, the interviews he used to do and the facial expression and just, he was another one of those special, and not too many bodybuilders ever were successful in wrestling, but Jesse Ventura came along after Billy and did a good job, but nobody was ever a bodybuilder and a talker like Superstar was. He was definitely the one and only.
How about teaming with Steve Kern?
Steve and I, again, he went to Monroe Junior High, went to Madison Junior High. We knew of each other. Then once we got to high school, we were immediately friends. His father, Lieutenant Colonel Richard Paul Kern, was first officer in Vietnam, shot down with a surface-to-air missile. He was a Phantom fighter pilot and all that kind of stuff. And so my dad was kind of his surrogate dad while his father was in the prisoner of war camp. So he was over to the house a lot, and we spent a lot of time together. And when he got out of high school, he went to med school in Mississippi, someplace. He made it about a year. He called me. He said, before I left, he said, you said that, your dad said that he would take me down and introduce me to Hero and train me and everything to be a wrestler. He said, I'm out of med school. He said, I've had enough. I want to come home and I want to be a wrestler. So he came home and Dad introduced him to Hero, and he trained with Hero. For everybody that worked out with Hero probably trained with him about a year. Mm-hmm. About a year before they actually got to get out and get in the ring and do anything. About a year-long process, 2 or 3 days a week. And that's how Steve got started. But it was fun knowing him and watching him grow up. And he was at my wedding, I was at his wedding, just sharing, going through life like me and Kevin Sullivan. And he and I just kind of going through life at the same pace and doing the same things at the same time, the same age and all that kind of jazz. He's still one of my very good friends. You have any good road stories from that period, that time period right there? Just crazy things that we all did when we were kids. I was coming back from a town one night and me, Kevin Sullivan, Paul Jones, and Dennis Stamp. And we passed Dusty. He sat on Highway 60. He had a lady in the car with him. So we went up in front of us 2 o'clock in the morning. So we all get naked. We're standing 2 o'clock in the morning on the side of the road hitchhiking, drinking beer. And so Dusty comes by and he slams on the brakes and slides over the road and he jumps out with a 44, big Western 44. Boom, boom. He's shooting at us. He's shooting up there. Well, the other guys, they're running and diving and trying to hide. And I'm standing holding my beer bottle going, come on, Dream, you can shoot it. You can shoot it. And boom, boom, guns going off. They're screaming, get out, Mike, get out. He's going to shoot you. Just silliness, stuff like that, No, we never hurt anybody, never did anything. Then same thing, Highway 60. Joe LeDuc and The heck was the guy? Louis Tillett. We stop at Yeehaw Junction. We're a little bit ahead of them. We're just finishing getting gas, and they're coming up behind us. They pull in as and Dusty had some big battles with Joe LeDuc and all that kind of stuff. So we thought it'd be funny to play a little joke on them. We were drinking Yago Sangria. So we had an empty bottle in the back of the car. So I filled it up with gas. We went down the street about a mile. I'm telling you, you're out in the middle of nowhere. There's nothing on Highway 60. I mean, it's no houses, no business, no cross streets, no anything. You got about 22 miles of road that's just a road out through farm country, pastures and cows on each side and all that kind of stuff. So we pull up on the side of the road and we're waiting. So we see the headlights come out of the gas station and here they come. So they get just about up to us. I run across the street, pour the gasoline, whoosh, Dusty hits it with a match. A flame about this high comes up. They hit the brakes. They slide through the fire, pull over Dusty and I like two little kids. We run back. We get in the car. Everybody's laughing. LeDuc runs over and he reaches through the window. Eyeballs. I don't know if you ever saw Joe LeDuc, yes. But he was a big, intense looking guy anyway. And he's choking Dusty through the window. You almost killed us. Are you crazy? Whatever. Dusty reaches down, grabs the sangria bottle. Bam! Hits him right across the forehead with it. Knocks him back out of the window. Starts to drive off. Dusty had like a 72 or 73 Eldorado convertible. And he had painted red and blue stars down the side of it, the American Dream. He made it his dream machine. So as we start to drive off, LeDuc jumps on the hood of the car. And he's on his all fours and he's looking through the window at Dusty. Dusty goes, you want to go for a ride? Dusty now takes off, going 80 miles an hour down Highway 60 with LeDuc on his hood. And I'm saying, Dusty, this isn't good. This isn't good. Don't hit the brakes. Don't turn. Don't hit the brakes. Just let off the gas and just coast on down and go over on the side of the road. If you hit the brakes, he's going to go right off. There ain't nothing. There's nothing for him to hold on to. I mean, so Dusty's slowed down. LeDuc rolled off the hood of the car, got down on the ground on all fours, and was crying, kissing the ground. He was so scared going down the road. But I mean, that was just stuff like that, night after night after night after night after night. We were always doing silly things, trying to keep everybody entertained. But that was some that, that are family friendly.
Yes. Teaming with Ray Stevens.
God, I wish I would have been older to be able to see Ray in his heyday with Ray and Pat Patterson. Ray and my dad were partners back in the early 60s. He was just an incredible guy. He had, same thing, he came from that school that my dad did, and in the ring, I wrestled plenty of times against Ray Stevens and Nick Bockwinkel. I wrestled against Ray Stevens and Pat Patterson. I mean, it was Ray Stevens and Ray Stevens. He was the guy. He was the team leader, you might say, and kept everything together. But he was incredible. I loved working with Ray Stevens.
When did you start to feel confident as a worker?
I started in 72 and probably about 5 years, probably about 1977, 78. So after about 5 years of working 7 nights a week.
Okay, not bad.
With the best, the one good thing is I had the opportunity to work with the best wrestlers there were. I mean, I'm talking about from Lou Thez to Pat O'Connor, Gene Kaninsky, Ray Stevens, Nick Bockwinkel, you name it, I had an opportunity to be in the ring with them. And when you're in the ring with the best a couple nights a week, if you can't learn, then I needed to quit the wrestling industry and go get a job at the 7-Eleven or something.
Right.
Because, and then on the other hand, a lot of guys never get an opportunity to work with people of that quality. So you're never really going to get much better than the quality of the guy you're wrestling against. If you're wrestling against somebody with no skills and no ability, then you're not really going to get any better, because you learn from someone every time you compete against them, and no matter what the situation is. So if you never get to work with someone better than you or knowledgeable or whatever, then you don't learn anything anyway. So I had an opportunity to work with the best of the best, night after night after night after night.
How was it working with Fujinami?
He was smooth, cool, a great amateur wrestler that made the turn to pro. I mean, we could go out and do single leg takedowns and switches and things that amateur guys did and make it look like, holy smokes, look at these guys. I mean, they can really wrestle. They know what they're doing. And he was in really, really good shape, very respectful. Hiro Matsuda had worked out with him some because Fujinami was a lot younger than Hiro was. Hiro had left Japan at a real early age and come to Florida in like 64 or 5 or something. He'd been here for a long time. And but it was the first time I ever really wrestled an international type superstar, to get a feel for the way they wrestle in other countries and stuff like that. He was something. I ran into a Japanese fan here that knows Fujinami. I said, "Oh, how's Fujinami doing?" "Oh, you know Fujinami?" "Yeah, I wrestled him in 1980, 81, you know." But he was good. He was so smooth. Where Saito, wrestled Saito a lot, Mr. Saito. He was big and rugged and suplex you off your head and just huge, a big, burly guy. Where Fujinami was more like Jack Briscoe. You never felt him. I mean, he was just smooth and cool and control, and he was like a Japanese Jack Briscoe, if I had to kind of say. He was very, very. I enjoyed working with him a lot.
Barry Windham, you touched on briefly before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I met Barry in 1979. He came to Florida, big, tall, skinny, long blonde hair, just one of those guys that the women loved, and he was always just so polite and so nice. And he was doing something one night and gave a guy a knee lift or whatever, and the guy's teeth went in his knee. And I mean, the next night his knee was swelled up. Got infected. His knee was swollen that big. And this happened on a Friday night. We were wrestling in Fort Lauderdale. Saturday night we were in Arcadia, and Barry was sick. I mean, that infection had got in, and he was pale, and you know, we were all hustling, trying to earn a living, and you know, couldn't afford not to wrestle. So I wrestled my match and his match, and then he got his paycheck and he got paid. He got paid. I was kind of the road agent, so I put his name on as that he worked. I think I wrestled for him a couple nights, and but he got his money. I didn't take his money. I worked for him, and he got his money, and he kind of never forgot that. You know, he never, that was some, I mean, it's $100, $150 or something, but he never ever forgot it. And we've remained good friends ever since. Up and down the road together and traveled together and funny stories. And, you know, he's just one of those special people that, God, he wrestled in Japan, got on a plane, flew to Orlando for the second Battle of the Belts. He wrestled Flair. And, you know, had been up 2 or 3 days, flew into Orlando. We picked him up, bring him to the building, and went out and wrestled an hour. Like it was nothing, you know. He was just one of those guys that, as tall as he was, he knew how to shrink in the ring, you might say. So if he was wrestling somebody my size or bigger or whatever, it always looked proportionate. You know, he never was towering over anyone, and he could adjust his height with his legs and everything so that everybody looked kind of even, and in and out of the ropes through the thing. And he just is a very, very unique, very special guy that I have all the, you know, all the good things I can say about him. You know, he's just always been a really nice guy.
How about wrestling Ric Flair?
Ooh, he was awesome. Dory Funk Jr. was pretty steady. The match was going to have the tempo, like, to go an hour, to wrestle an hour. It was steady. You knew there was going to be nothing really crazy. You knew it was going to kind of go along. Or Flair, I mean, he was like idle 1 minute, sprinting the next minute, an endurance race for 4 minutes after that, jumping, pole vaulting over. I mean, he was, whoo, 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 whoo. He was just full of energy, full of ideas and thoughts, and his brain was going at it faster than his body was, and he just. I met him in 1973 or 74. I did a movie with Ed Asner called The Wrestler, and Vern Gagne was one of the guys that put the money up. A lot of wrestling promoters in America anteed up money to do this movie. And Flair was in Vern's school, and he looked just like Dusty Rhodes. Short spike hair, Dusty size. Mm-hmm. And when I saw him on the cover of a magazine a couple years later, Ric Flair with a robe and everything, I went, is that the same guy I met that looked like Dusty a few years ago? And just was in shock. And man, once he dropped the weight and got the hair and he got his niche and things, he was awesome. He was just awesome in the ring. Unbelievable. I was wrestling one night and I'd been training real heavy in the gym and put the sleeper on him. When I put the sleeper on him, my forearm knotted up. I mean, cramped that I couldn't open my hands. We're in the ring in Sarasota. I'm going, oh shit. So I put that arm down and I put the other arm up to put the sleeper on him the other way. That one knotted up. So I mean, I'm sitting, I'm in the ring and I got, my fingers are curled in and I'm trying to hang on to his head. And I said, hey, Rick, my forearms are knotted. I can't open my hands. Can't. He reaches up immediately, brings me over his head, comes up behind me, and puts like a half Nelson on my head. And before I know it, he's massaging my forearms in the ring. He's holding me and containing me and rubbing my forearm, trying to get the cramps to go out of my hands so I could get my hands open again and everything. Wow. I mean, he was just an awesome guy to be in the ring with. I'm very glad that I had the opportunity to do that. He was something special. Still is. I don't know how old he is. I know I'm 57. He's got to be a couple years older than me. Yeah. And to do what he still can do is just absolutely amazing. I haven't been in the ring for 2 years. In my earlier 50s, I went, I'm done with this. The jarring, I can't stay in the gym to stay in the condition that I really need to. I don't heal like I used to. And I thought it was quite apropos. My last match was Dusty Rhodes and I wrestling against Kevin Sullivan and CM Punk in Tampa.
Wow, that's a...
Yeah.
3 is I can see, and then Punk...
Yeah, that was... now I see CM Punk on TV and everything, and go, wow, yeah, that's cool. He had just gotten started and, was young, and his eyeballs were this big. He's looking at Dusty and me and Kevin and these different guys, and he was almost overwhelmed with the people in the dressing room that he was sitting in there with, and he was so polite and so respectful. But yeah, I thought about it the next day. I said, I'm done. That was 55. When the day comes that I can't go and give it my all and feel good when I come out of the ring, that if somebody paid $20 for a ticket, I want to give them $30 worth for their money. And I just, I still go to the gym and work out and stuff like that, but just can't do it like I would want to anymore.
How about Harley Race, and what did wrestling him, what did that do for your career?
Anytime you could wrestle a world's champion, holy smokes, that was just to be in the ring against a world's champion, to get that opportunity for the promoter to think that you were good enough or qualified or whatever. And I wrestled Harley a couple times, but the one most significant was at the Bayfront Center, and we had Harley coming in for a big show and really didn't have an opponent for him. Dusty was working someplace and Barry was out of town. Everybody was kind of gone. Barry wasn't even there yet. This was in the 70s. Barry was still, he wasn't, but all of our so-called big names were gone. And we had a date at the Bayfront Center and we had the world's champion. So my dad comes up with this thing. Rocky had just come out. Mm-hmm. So Dad calls me and said, hey, Rocky, come down to the sportatorium. I need to talk to you. I said, who? You'll understand when you get here. Get down to the sportatorium. So I went down to the sportatorium. He had the camera guy there. And he explained, he said, okay, here's the deal. We got Harley. We don't have anybody ready to wrestle the world's champion. We've got 2 weeks to get you ready. I went, you know, what do you want? And so we did exactly the same thing. I went out and run, and I had a speed bag in my garage at home, and I hit the speed bag, and I lifted weights, and I squatted, and I did the one-arm push-ups, and we did a video, just a simple video, like the Rocky thing, and we put music to it and all that, and sold out the Bayfront Center. And when the Bayfront Center was torn down a few years ago, like the top 10 events in that building, 7 or 8 of them were wrestling.
Wow.
And Jack Briscoe and Dory Funk Jr. were number 1 for attendance. Dusty and Terry Funk was number 2 for attendance, and me and Harley Race. That match was the 3rd largest attendance record in that building.
Wow.
So just, you know, doing the Rocky thing, but again, just to be in the ring with the world's champion. And he was when you get to that level and you're the world's champion, you are different than everyone else. You're a different breed. You're a different cat. And Harley was one of those guys that was just incredibly strong. Holy smokes. I mean, he could just grab me with one hand and pick me up and set me over here and do different things. He was just an awesome powerhouse guy in the ring. And you would never think, looking at him, that he was that way. But he suplexed Andre the Giant.
Wow.
Yeah, he suplexed Andre into the ring from outside. Andre came up on the apron, and he kicked him. And when Andre bent over, he hooked his head and picked him up over the rope and backed him up into the ring and suplexed him. And Andre was over 500 pounds.
Wow.
Yeah, so he was an awesomely strong athlete. And mean. He had the deep, sunk, narrow eyes. He'd look across the ring at me. I'd go, oh boy, I hope he ain't hungover tonight.
There was a huge angle with Kevin Sullivan. How out of control did that angle get?
Do what now?
The Kevin Sullivan angle?
Right.
How out of control did that angle get?
Well, you know, I mean, out of control. Somebody asked me the other day if my dad ever tried to keep somebody, you might say, calm down or keep them from stepping out. And no, it was always wide open. If you could do something that nobody else could do or look like nobody else looked or make yourself something special or whatever, then that was fine. And Kevin, really, his devil thing and all that came after it was mid-85. My dad died January of 85. So my dad there was nobody there to control Kevin.
Mm-hmm.
So it was Katie barred the door. You know, his entourage of snake people and half women with their hair shaved and just everything. He took it to the limit. He pushed it as hard as he could push it. And like I say, I mean, people were saying, "Devil, go home," writing on the walls. You know, we were getting mail and stuff from preachers and reverends, and you know, how can you have the devil worshiper on your TV and you know, all that kind of stuff. And then he didn't slow him down. He just kept right on going. And then it finally leveled off and people kind of got used to it. And then he went to Atlanta.
Was there any angle that he ever did that just totally got haywire, or everything was pretty much kept in control, basically?
Yeah, you know, I mean, it was pretty well, nothing really got crazy and out of hand. His interviews were really his wild and the X's on his head, the Manson thing, and you know, he pushed some boundaries of social issues that I don't think my dad might have let him do because of the way people might have conceived it or something. But you know, he drew a lot of money. You know, he made a lot of money, and he always backed it up, and he never missed a town, and he didn't say anything that he was going to do that he didn't do. And so God bless him, you know, if he wanted to put himself in that light. And he's still remembered in Florida as the devil.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, everybody see, hey, you talked to the devil lately? Yeah.
How about J.J. Dillon?
JJ was a great man. I mean, he was a good wrestler and then became a manager. And JJ is extremely intelligent. I worked a lot with him at WCW and very personable, but had done the whole thing, had wrestled, had done some promoting, Then went to being a manager, and then went to work in the office in WWE, and was a detail. He wrote down everything. Wrote his calendars and books and the things that he would do to keep track of who wrestled who and who won and who lost and how they won or lost and just everything. His knack for detail was just incredible. Along with being a good wrestler, a good interview guy. He was one of those who was well-rounded. He could interview, he could wrestle, he could manage. He kind of set the tone for kind of like Gary Hart, and that Gary never tried to make himself the show. He was always there to support the show, and J.J. Dillon did the same thing.
Okay. How much a part of the booking committee were you?
Well, I mean, at different times, Jerry Briscoe and I were the bookers of Florida. I helped my dad a lot when he was running booking Florida. Buddy Rogers and myself and Jerry Briscoe booked for a while. Dusty did some booking there, and I helped him. I was always involved, kind of in one way or another, because I was my father's son, and went up and down the road with him every day and talked a lot, and a lot of his ideas of the wrestling industry and people and all that kind of stuff was in my head. And Kevin Sullivan and I booked Florida for a while, so I had different people and mentors, and but I was involved quite a bit for a lot of years in booking the territory.
How about Bill Watts studying under your father?
Bill was a cool guy. He was a big, awesome Oklahoma amateur wrestler, redneck. The only thing Bill and I ever really fought about was how to beat somebody up the right way. Mm-hmm. Guy came down and wanted to be a wrestler, so that was my job. Anybody that came down to be a wrestler, my dad would say, "Hey, Mike, come down here," and I had to wrestle him. So, guy came down, I wrestled. I took him down, and Matt burned his elbows and pinned him and let him up, and took him down and let him up, and took him down. Well, shit, Bill was 6'3", 6'4", 300 pounds, and so Bill said, "Get out of there, Graham. Let me show you the way you're supposed to do that." So, okay. So, I rolled out of the ring, and he walked in, and there's a guy walked up to me and just punched him in the mouth. He looked at me and said, "God damn it, that's the way you're supposed to do it." I said, and then he went up to his office. I was out on his heels chasing behind him. He sat down. I said, "Don't you ever come down in front of somebody that I'm working out with and punch him like that and tell me that's the way you deal with somebody." I said, "I'll deal with them my way. You deal with them your way. But don't ever come down and try to embarrass me in front of some mark and their family about the correct way to beat up somebody." I said, "I'll get it done the way I want to." So, but Bill was, he was a good guy. He was very intense. He wanted to learn. He followed my dad around like a puppy dog. "What about this, Eddie? What about this, Eddie? What about this, Eddie? What about this, Eddie?" And we're just constantly learning and remembering, and then went back to Oklahoma and took over Oklahoma and spread out and was running the Superdome and, did a lot of stuff. So he took what he learned from my dad and used it very wisely.
With Dusty, did he ever get drunk with power, do you think? Or?
Nah, Dusty's always been the dream. He sometimes can be a little overbearing. He sometimes, the American dream, I think, can go a little too far. We've always been friends forever, and we probably always will be. He kind of sometimes, I think, maybe demanded or thought he should get more respect than he thought he wasn't getting, or whatever. It's funny, he used to get mad at me or something, wouldn't call me for 2 or 3 months. I had to call him. Well, that's 6-year-old stuff. You do that in junior high school. And so we've had our differences, but he was kind of the big brother that I never had. My father thought of him dearly, and Dusty loved my dad and learned a lot from my dad. But, drunk with power, I don't think so. I think he was the first guy that ever came up with names for events. Hot August Night. Huge wrestling event we had in Key West in 1980 or 81. Last Tango in Tampa Stadium, unheard of. We did 40, 50,000 people in Tampa Stadium. But he named everything. Every event. It just wasn't, let's go see Championship Wrestling from Florida. It was, let's go to Tango in Tampa. Let's go to Hot August Night. Let's go to this event, that event. He always had names. He always had that thing going on in his head for big shows and special names. When he was at WCW, he knew almost every pay-per-view they had. The something Stampede and the this and the that, and without his creativity for that big show thought and that big show process, it eventually would have happened, but probably wouldn't have been until years later. He just was ahead of his time in stuff like that. And because of that, I think he thought that he should be treated different or more special or whatever. And when someone didn't treat him the way he thought they should, then he would get a little pissy about it.
Okay. Billy Jack Haynes.
Billy, God bless him, he came to Florida and from out of Oregon, and man, he drew a lot of money. He looked good, and he could do an interview and all that stuff. But I don't know. I haven't been around him. Last time I was around him was like 93, 94 at WCW, and his mind was thinking different, and he was mad. Seemed to be mad at the world, and thought the wrestling business owed him a living, and was mad at promoters that he said they forced him to take steroids, and just he wanted to blame all the issues of life on somebody else instead of just saying, hey, I did it. I made a mistake or whatever, and dealing with it, he tried to make it everybody else's fault, and it wasn't everybody else's fault. He got paid every night he went to the ring. No wrestling promoter ever put a gun to his head and said, you're going to go out there and wrestle tonight for free.
Right.
He got paid for everything he ever did. Every wrestler that ever went out there, they all got paid. And that's the kind of thing. I don't do a lot of these events and stuff to be around a lot of the older wrestlers because they're all bitter and miserable and think they were cheated out of something or whatever. I said, man, it gave you a life. It made you someone. People remember you. How can you go home and not realizing what a special gift you had, and an opportunity and a time? Go do something else, but don't bitch about it. Don't whine about it. Be happy you did what you did and keep on going.
Early memories of Magnum TA.
I found Magnum. Terry Wayne Allen. I went out to San Antonio, Texas in about 1982. And there was this tall guy with big bushy hair and a big bushy mustache, and walked kind of duck-footed and was clumsy looking in the ring, and just physically looked good, ton of personality. Man, after the second night there, I called my dad. I said, Dad, you're going to think I'm crazy when you meet this guy. I said, he's not the best wrestler. He's young, but every night we go out, every place we go, women are all over him. I mean, like nothing I'd ever seen before, we're used to, ladies and stuff, but they were just all over him. Dad says, well, get him to Florida, tell him to, because my dad and Joe Blanchard were very good friends, and Joe was the promoter. So Dad called Joe and said, hey, you doing anything with Terry or whatever? And Joe said, no, he just really started, and he's just out here working. So Terry gave his notice and stayed another couple of weeks or whatever, and then came to Florida. But we named him Magnum TA after Magnum on TV, and Dad had him wearing the flower shirts, and my father created Magnum TA, and Terry was just a big, bright-eyed sponge of learning and happy and riding in airplanes and all that kind of stuff at a very young career. And he was like when Jimmy Crockett wanted to compete against Vince. Terry was one of the first, if not the first, to sign a contract. It was unheard of in the wrestling business. We didn't have contracts. If we wanted to go someplace and wrestle, we went and wrestle. If we got ready to leave, we could go in and say, hey, I'm out of here. I'll give you my 2 weeks or 1 week, whatever you want, but I want to go to Carolina, or I want to go to New York, or I want to go over here. And if we did something stupid and the wrestling promoter didn't like it, he could fire us. So there was, when he signed a contract, it kind of sent ripples through the entire wrestling world. This young guy just signed a contract for like 150, 175,000. I mean, back huge money. We were all like, holy smokes. It was amazing. And then right after that, he had his car accident. And the rest is history. But he was, he just had that magnetism for other people and with a lot of personality, and he looked good, and he had a good run with Nikita Koloff, and made he drew a lot of money. He was very good in the ring.
Abdullah the Butcher.
Oh gosh, I never wrestled against Abdullah. I watched him wrestle a lot. My style was so different than his. You know, wrestling promoters wouldn't put a wrestler against a shover, brawler, you know, kind of person, because our styles just were so different that the match would have been horrible. So, but I watched him a lot. I, you know, listened, watched, and Abby, I think he's still wrestling. I think he still works some in Puerto Rico and stuff like that. But his style of wrestling, he can do till he dies. You know, he can push and lean, and he's big, and he uses his weight as his advantage to pin you in a corner or to do something. And he's always going to be Abdullah. I mean, there never will be another Abdullah the Butcher, and everybody will always remember him. But he was just had a completely different style than me.
Terry Funk.
Crazy. Went to a 4th of July party with him on Stanley Blackburn, who was the president of the NWA back years and years ago, and I was probably 12 or 13. Terry was in the reserves, and people are throwing firecrackers and stuff. 4th of July, pop, pop, pop. Terry says, "I'll be right back." I said, "Okay." 30, 40 people at this party, and comes back. He's got 2 hand grenades. He went and broke into the goddamn place where he was in the military and got 2 hand grenades. So this guy had like a 300 or 400 acre farm. We're out in the country. So it was an old building, and Stanley didn't know what Terry had. So Terry goes, he said, "Hey Stanley," said, "do you mind if I light a firecracker in your building out there?" Stanley goes, "Nah, it's an old building, not doing anything." Terry goes, "Well, it might hurt it a little or something." So, "Yeah, it's okay. I've been wanting to tear it down anyway." Threw a hand grenade in this guy's building and just blew the building to smithereens. So that's Terry Funk. You never know what you're going to get with Terry Funk. I mean, he's so, like we had said before, how come one second generation wrestler can make it, another one can't? Look how different he and Dory Jr. are. They're like 2 different people. Right. Terry's wild and crazy and energy and his interviews and making faces and doing wild, crazy stuff, where Junior is very calm, very direct, very monotone, doesn't get excited, everything. But they're from the same mom and dad. They're the same couple years difference, but totally different people.
Gordon Solie.
Wow. I was with Gordon the night he got hired. I liked stock car racing when I was a little boy. And my dad was gone a lot, so I didn't get a chance to go. But I was probably 10, maybe. And we went to there used to be, Phillips Field was a racetrack, almost downtown Tampa. It was on the University of Tampa grounds, basically. Now the University of Tampa uses it as one of their facilities for something. It was stock car racing. So I was there, and it's smoky and gloomy, and the old cars are going around. So when the races were over, I stood up, leaving my dad, sit down for a minute. He said, "I've been listening to this guy's voice over the PA system, so I want to meet him." "Okay, Dad." I'm just a little punk kid. We're sitting there, and Gordon comes out of the press box. So my dad walks, "Hey, I'm Eddie Graham, wrestling promoter." And Gordon was doing some stuff on the radio at that time. So anyway, Dad asked him, "Would you be interested in doing wrestling?" I said, "I love your voice, and if you'll listen to me, I will tell you how I want you to announce and what I want from you and everything. If you'll listen to me, I will teach you how to be a announcer that I want to have on my TV. You've got the voice. I've got the wrestling brain. Do you want to come to work for me? And Gordon said, well, yeah, So Dad took him down, put him in the ring, and he wrist locked him, and he face locked him, and he put him in the figure 4, and he arm barred him, and he put him in every hole imaginable so Gordon could feel where the pain was, what it was doing, how it was squeezing. Was it a hold that would compress your diaphragm and you couldn't breathe? Was it something that you were in continuous pain? And so he worked out with Gordon in the ring a couple times a week for a month. And my dad's theory was, Gordon, if I have a blind wrestling fan at home, I want him to know what's going on in that ring. Mm-hmm. I don't want you talking about, you saw John Doe and Betty walking down the street the other day. I don't want you talking about this over here or that. I want you watch that match and talk about that match. So if I have a blind wrestling fan, he can watch TV and know what's going on. That was my dad's idea and concept of what an announcer was supposed to do. And needless to say, Gordon did it quite well. The best. He'd probably go down in history as the best wrestling commentator ever. And he'd come to the office one day a week, always park his little Mercedes up on the curb. And he built a big racetrack one time. He gave me a lighter, like a VIP lighter. I thought that was so cool. When I was in high school, I could get into the stock car races free. But and then his kids, he lived in the same neighborhood we did, and I messed with we'd build model cars, and my mom would take me over and drop them off. I'd spend a day with them, then they'd come over and spend a day with me. And Gordon was a very special guy and helped make wrestling really what it is today. Of course, that's why he was inducted into the Hall of Fame this past March, and he did a lot for the wrestling industry with his voice.
Okay. Paul Jones said in an interview that he left the territory because he felt your dad was putting you over where he should have been. How do you feel about that?
Well, that's stupid. I mean, he gave Paul Jones every opportunity. People are still talking about it. Paul went out to the top of Gandy Bridge and threw the Florida heavyweight belt off the bridge, saying, I'm the best. Nobody's ever going to beat me. I'm tired of carrying the belt around. I'm just going to get rid of it. And people were in boats. He had said that he was going to do it. People were in boats down in the water waiting for him to throw the belt, and somebody dove in and actually found the belt and took it home.
Really?
I mean, he had every push, every opportunity that he could get. So I don't know why he would have said something like that. I mean, because when Paul was there, I mean, I had just started wrestling. And for the first years, I was, second match, third match. I was learning my trade. I never really did anything, or I don't know why he would have thought of me as any kind of a threat, or that I was getting opportunities that he should have gotten, because that just wasn't true. So why he would say something like that, I don't know. Maybe he feels inadequate. Maybe he has some inadequacies and everybody wants to blame somebody else for their problems. If they can't get the job done, if something happens, it's never their fault. They want to point a finger, or they want to blame somebody, or they want to whatever. Nobody wants to own their lack of ability or the mistakes in life that they make. So I don't know why he would say what he did.
Were any other vets jealous of your push, or did you really have no problem?
Any other what?
Any other vets? Any other people ahead of you? Did they jealous of you the push you were getting off?
No. I mean, I wrestled Buddy Wolf that had a great career in Minneapolis, and he came to Florida and never had any issues. Never. Again, everybody was always very nice. My father was very businesslike. I was very businesslike. I don't think I was ever put in a situation ahead of anyone else that someone else could have done a better job, or I never got any special pay. I worked right beside everybody every night and did what it took to draw money, to make people come back week after week after week after week after week. That's what our job was. I didn't care. I was glad Dusty Rhodes was the main event, and Pak Song was the main event, and Paul Jones was the main event, and Terry. Somebody needed to get the people in the building, so I was just glad to have an opportunity to be on the card to get part of the paycheck. I was happy to do whatever it took. Just get people in the building. If we got nobody in the building, we got nothing to split up.
Right.
number one was sell out the building. And I didn't care if I was first, last. I never had an ego issue. I never thought I was better or bigger or anything else than anybody. I was just glad to be there. I was glad to have a job, and I loved the wrestling business. I would have done it for free if I would have needed to or whatever, because I loved the wrestling business.
You worked in the AWA for a little bit. How was your dad and Vern, their booking? How would you compare them?
Well, Vern didn't go to Amarillo, Texas, and Chattanooga, Tennessee, and the crazy, wild kind of places. Vern was a college graduate, Minnesota. You know, he worked some in New York, so his booking was a little more traditional, down to earth. If someone was the champion, then he would create some thing or way for the challenger to get on TV and make a reasonable story. But as far as like chain matches and the cage matches and bull rope matches and the wild, crazy stuff that we did in Florida, Vern was just a much more subdued. Later on, he had to pick up the pace or fall behind. But the good thing Vern had was snow. Because when it's snowing outside, there is nothing to do. So he had a captive audience with a good TV show, good-looking athletes, credibility. He had been in the Minnesota, and he only had was huge cities. He didn't go to little cities like Arcadia and and all that kind of stuff. He worked San Francisco, Denver, Minneapolis, Winnipeg. Yeah, he worked in the big cities with huge population, and basically in the winter, summertime, they didn't do hardly any business because they had 2 months to be out on a lake or fishing or doing something. So their big season, when they got all 90% of their income, was all in the winter months. When people were cramped up, sitting in a house, couldn't get out. Well, they, of course, had all indoor buildings and all that kind of stuff. So it gave the people something to do. But just because Vern was much mellower than my dad, wasn't crazy. Just different personality denotes different ways things are booked and how they're handled.
Early memories of Lex Luger.
Dumbass from day one.
Really?
Yeah, dumbass from day one. He was the epic big man syndrome. Just because he had some muscles, he thought that people should really think he was good. He failed as a football player. He failed as everything he ever tried to do. The only reason he made it in wrestling is because he was a good opponent. He was wrestling Ric Flair. He couldn't go in the ring. If you didn't have Luger's tools, he looked great. Cannot take that away from him. He looked great. Big arms, lean, but his head never did quite get in the process. And he was always a good challenger. He was always a good opponent for the Ric Flairs and Rick Rudes and the guys that could get in the ring and really get the job done. Luger always thought because he had big muscles, you were supposed to be afraid of him, or because he did this, or because he was taller than you were supposed to not do certain things. And he always had this misconception of what wrestling was about. And, he was one of the guys that made a lot of money running on somebody else's coattails.
Why do you think the territory was so successful in Florida?
Well, back in the day, it was almost before my dad started the territory, before there was a professional football team or a baseball team or a basketball team or a hockey team. It was before Outback Steakhouse and all the restaurant chains and all that kind of stuff. My dad kept everything extremely real. People like violence. They don't go to a stock car race because of the type of cam and the tire compound and the shock absorbers and the way the suspensions are set. They go to see a crash. Everybody wants to see cars crash. People like violence. They like to get out and they could go to the wrestling matches and scream and yell and cuss and see good versus evil, and it was an event. It was a a recreational ventilation system that when they left that building that night, they were going, man, you know, they weren't mad at their boss at the job the next day. I mean, they got all their frustration out, and in a very real manner. Like my dad used to say, it's a mental and physical game of chess, was the way he looked at a wrestling match. And it was successful because he kept everything real. No stupid fantasy stuff, no fireworks, no comedy acts, he kept it very real, and he kept it very competitive, and good TVs, good athletes, well respected in the community all over Florida. He was one of the founders of the Florida Sheriff's Boys Ranch. Dory Funk Sr. had started the Sheriff's Ranch in Amarillo back in the 50s, and Dad saw how that worked and the opportunities and everything that it gave Dory Sr. So when Dad came to Florida and wanted to change his image from the villain that was hated to a good community guy, that was one of the things he did. He got with the sheriff of Tampa, Ed Blackburn at the time, and then Ed, of course, knew the sheriffs all around, and they started the Florida Sheriff's Boys Ranch. Now it's huge, Florida Sheriff's Boys Ranch in Girls Villa, and they've got 8 or 10 or 15 different places in Florida. When it first started, there was one in Live Oak. That was where the Boys Ranch was. So Dad got in the community. He had good TV. He kept everything very real, and he kept everything very violent.
There we go. Sex and violence.
Huh?
Sex and violence.
Yeah.
Itself.
Yes, that's it. Sex and he left the sex out.
Yeah.
He went hardcore for violence.
Okay.
Yeah.
How hard was it on you and your dad when Dusty jumped when he left you guys?
Well, Dad had it kind of broke my dad's heart in that he had given Dusty part of the Florida territory for free in hopes that Dusty would, if he was going to go to Atlanta and work some, but that he would spend time, and Dad had spent years getting Dusty over and creating Dusty Rhodes and all that kind of stuff. So when Jimmy Crockett wanted to compete against Vince and he got in touch with Dusty, well, Dad couldn't very well get mad at him because he was going to pay him more money. We got a short-term deal going on here. Dad didn't spite anyone for making money, but when Dusty left, he took Barry, he took Magnum, he took Ron Bass, he took half the territory with him. And that really made Dad mad because here he spent 5 or 6 years giving Dusty the opportunity to create the American Dream character and live it out and give him part of the territory and give him part of the building in Orlando and all that kind of stuff as perks and bonuses. And then when Dusty left, it was like he was almost trying to kill the territory for taking all the talent with him. So, that wasn't a good thing, but you can't spite them for going. If they were making, $100,000 in Florida and they could go work up for Crockett and make 200, the heck, that's what we're all here for. We're all here trying to earn a living. So Dad just thought he should have done it a different way, that he shouldn't have taken the guys with him, that he shouldn't have, if they wanted to go on their own, or if Crockett wanted to get in touch with them or whatever, but Dusty in the dressing room and in my dad's territory handpicked the guys, his crew, that he wanted to take with him when he made his jump to Crockett. So that made Dad angry.
Do you take it personally? I guess
probably, yeah, probably did. We never talked that much about it because Dad was he kept everything bottled up. He was very tight-mouthed, never talked about problems or any of that kind of stuff. Guess he figured his shoulders were big enough that he could carry any weight or any issue, and that he could overcome it. That he'd created all those guys, and he'd just go create some more. Mm-hmm. So it never really got the opportunity to.
Mm-hmm. Okay. We're gonna get to a little touchy subject. Everybody knows you. Knows your dad and stuff like that. What happened to your dad? How do you find out about that? And what do you maybe understand why?
Well, looking back now, kind of, but I was at the Super Bowl at Palo Alto, California. Mm-hmm. The Miami Dolphins were playing the San Francisco 49ers. Mm-hmm. John Ayers, who had grew up in Amarillo, was good friends with Terry. I'd been to parties with Terry South with John and everything. and I knew guys that were playing on the Miami Dolphins, so they paged me in the Super Bowl during the pregame festivities and music and all that kind of stuff going on. They paid Mike Graham, please come to the box office. I asked my wife, I said, did they just say Mike Graham come to the box office?
Mm-hmm.
They don't do that. I mean, they don't page people during the Super Bowl ceremony. That ain't done. She said, yeah, I think they said Mike Graham, go to the thing. And I asked another friend, did you hear that? Yeah. So anyway, I figure one of the guys wants to bring me down in the dressing room and say hi to the ball, because they all knew I was coming.
Okay.
And that here's John Ayers said, come down and, shake everybody's hand or whatever. We'd been to Vegas, not Vegas, but Lake Tahoe, skiing, gambling, made enough money gambling, chartered a private plane to fly us from Tahoe to Palo Alto. I mean, living life, everything was good. We were having fun. When I walked into the box, I was saying, my name's Mike Graham. Like, page me. And the woman goes, oh, yeah, you got to call home. Obviously, the first thing, I think I had 2 children at the time. My son was 12 and my daughter was 9. I thought, oh, my God, something's happened to one of the kids. Call home. My mother-in-law answered the phone. Hello. I said, hey, Lucille, it's Mike. And she just burst into tears. What's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong? It's your dad. Dad? What's wrong with my dad? He shot himself. And he's in the hospital and he's hooked up to machines. And your mother, a family member has to say to unplug him or keep him alive, and your mom just can't do it, and crying. And it was like all of a sudden I was in La La Land. I went, shot himself. I don't understand. And went back up in the stadium and sat down. What is it? Dad just shot himself. They went, oh my God. And I said, oh shit, nothing I can do now. It's just, no, we can't watch the game. So my friend, very successful businessman, chartered a jet and flew us home. And I got back home the next morning and went to the hospital, and there he sat back in the corner, his head all bandaged up and everything. Mom was crying, and the hospital full of people. Sat down with the doctors and said, what do we do? I said, will he ever walk, talk, see, get up, go to the bathroom? No, he's done. The bullet didn't come out. The bullet went in his head and rattled around and went around and just like destroyed everything. And he said not only that, but he said he shot himself twice. I said, what? I guess the first time he put the gun in his mouth, and when he pulled the trigger, he flinched, and it blew the side of his face off. His cheek and jawbone and all that kind of stuff was gone. Put the gun in his other hand and put it up the side of his head. I said, well, it was no accident. I thought, well, maybe he was cleaning the gun and it went off or something. I was grasping at anything to say, my dad really didn't commit suicide by shooting himself. I mean, he didn't do it. Well, he did. And the doctor said, he'll be a vegetable the rest of his life. He'll never get out of bed. And I said, you don't want to live that way. He didn't want to live healthy, much less in the state that he's in. So I said, will he feel any pain, if we unhook the machine? Or no. I said, there won't be any pain. There won't be nothing. I said, well, how long will he live? He said, maybe an hour and a half. So I looked at Mom and I said, Mom, we got to do it. He wouldn't want to be here like this. So we went out. I said, okay, bullet. And he lived about 5 minutes. Take a minute. Whew. That was only 23 years ago.
Oh, geez.
But he'd swim to my house and put my kids on a raft and swim back to his house and sit at the street at the end of the night and wait for me to come home and make sure I got home safe. And just, it was unbelievable. My morning wake up call every morning. What are you doing today? What are you doing today? What are you buying? What are you, looking at buildings, looking at this, looking at that, what's up? So it was just totally, and then I kept saying, I said, I got to find his doctor. He had to have had something that was going to kill a cancer or something, But just 55 and depressed, and some business deals had embarrassed him. The wrestling business was changing, and there's nothing he could do about it. It just all, boom, it just all consumed him at one time. And he just figured, shit on it, I'm out of here.
So that's basically the reason why, then you think?
Yeah.
Just couldn't take it anymore.
Yeah. You know, the business that he loved, Vince was doing his thing, and the talent was leaving, and he was getting older, and he couldn't wrestle anymore, and he had cut the company up into our company into so many different pieces. I mean, Hiro Matsuda owned part of it, Duke Himoku owned part of it, the Briscoe brothers owned part of it, Buddy Colt owned a little piece of it, I had a piece of it, Dusty had a piece of it. He'd kind of lost control of his own business, where he had run the wrestling business of the world. I mean, Japan, America, for years and years and years and years. And had some problem at home. Just a lot of things hit him at one time.
And how did your mom take it? Was she okay afterwards? I mean, I know it's a horrible thing.
Yeah, you know, we just both dealt with it. You know, we just both dealt with it, and she had her business. She really focused. She had a company called Lucy's Fancy, and I mean, she just went to work every day and stayed there as long as she could, and would occasionally go to High Lie. She liked to bet on High Lie. She'd go to High Lie. Just tried to stay socially busy with her girlfriends and her business, and you know, continue on. What else can you do? You know.
I'm going to ask this question. I don't feel too comfortable asking it, but I'm going to ask it anyway, and you can answer it any way you like. Okay. Billy Jack Haynes, in a shoot interview that he did, said that he thinks your father killed himself because Dusty took all the talent and left for Crockett.
No,
what do you think?
A little piece. A little piece. You know, like I said, he was hitting that point of life. He had been in the wrestling business all of his life. He had done pretty well in real estate. He let a friend of his outside the wrestling business lie to him about some money that Dad gave him. He was supposed to be buying land with it, and the guy went and paid for truck tires, and the guy was in the trucking business and went and paid gas for his trucks. And I'm talking $500,000, not just 20 grand or something, but $500,000. And Dad felt, and his pride was just too much. Pride killed him. He felt embarrassed about doing that, like the guy had made him look like a fool or something. And then Dusty taking the guys, and this other guy cheating him out of some money, the wrestling business changing. He had issues with his personal life with my mom and that stuff. Just, I'm 57 now, so I realize, you know, as we get older, and a lot of athletes go through it at a very young age. They have that separation anxiety when they can't participate in their sport anymore. But they're in their maybe 30s or early 40s where they're young, they're healthy, they got plenty of other things they can do. When Dad went through it, it's all he'd done his whole life. You know, the wrestling business was all he knew. He had never done anything else. So when all of a sudden he sees the wrestling business changing and that going over here, and embarrassed by the guy cheating him out of the money, and personal issues at home, and just everywhere he looked, there was nothing good that he could see. Just said, I'm done.
Did you think at that time, when all this was, hell was breaking loose, did you think the territory could continue?
No, because all the partners were arguing among themselves. And without a leader, nothing can survive, you know? When Dad was alive, what he said went. Nobody questioned it. Nobody did anything. Well, when he died, and there was 10 different people that owned a piece of the company, then they started butting heads with, oh, no, I don't want to run Jacksonville. I don't want to hire that guy. No, we can't pay that guy that much money. No, and it just started crumbling from within. And then Jimmy Crockett put the cake on the icing on the cake, when he came in and said, oh yeah, we'll combine Carolina and Florida. Well, he was trying to figure out how to pay for the damn airplanes that he had bought. So instead of using on a card with 15 guys, instead of using 12 from Florida and 2 or 3 guys off his Channel 17, he'd send the whole card and charge the office $400 a person transportation. So basically we were drawing money, but he was taking it all just to pay for his airplanes. And when we finally kept, we ran Ocala or something, then had, I don't know, $15,000, $20,000 check. Then Jimmy calls and said, yeah, send that check up to the office. I need, here's the fax, the transportation bill and all that kind of stuff. And Duke came to me and he kind of said, well, Mike, we got to, they want the money, but we got to pay our bills, whatever. I said, to hell with him. Put the money in the bank. I said, we can't go on paying his airplane costs. We've got guys that wrestle and live here. He's leaving all of our guys at home, and they're starving, flying people in, paying them huge money, and charging us for the airfare for all of them. That's done. We ain't doing it anymore. So that really was the icing on the cake. Jimmy Crockett bankrupted Championship Wrestling from Florida with mismanagement.
So there's nothing you could do about it, I guess.
No, not really, because he had already taken all the talent. If he didn't want to send Dusty, or if he didn't want to send Magnum, or he didn't want to send somebody off Channel 17, we weren't going to draw. And then when I said, no, we're not sending you more money, we're not using out of an 18-man roster, 16 of your guys. That math does not work. It isn't going to make it. And so then he does, well, then we'll sever our relationship, and you do what you want to do, and I'll do what I want to do.
So basically, it was territory's in trouble, and that was it.
Yep.
Nothing about it.
Yep.
Did you, when Vince started to expand, did you realize that the territory days were over at that point?
My dad basically forewarned me that the days of the territories were going to be over 15 years, 20 years before they were. He saw the coming of cable TV way before it ever happened. He saw that if you weren't on cable TV, that you're going to be looked at as a secondary promotion, because people were going to look at whatever went all over America as the promotion. So he knew it was coming. And when he saw Vince going out and see another thing, Vince Jr., when he came into Florida, on top of Jimmy's doing his deal, when Vince came in, we were on TV in Orlando, Jacksonville, Tampa, West Palm, Fort Myers, Tallahassee, Miami, all those places for free. We didn't pay money to be on TV. We did a barter system where we got half the advertising time to talk about the matches that were coming. They could sell the other half to sponsors. That's how the TV station made their money. When Vince came in, he says, how much advertisement time do you got on that show? The guy goes, I don't know, $2,000 worth or something. Vince says, well, how'd you like to not have to sell that advertising time? I'll give you $2,000 a week for it. TV station went, yeah. So Vince came in and bought all the TVs. Because we couldn't compete with $2,000 a week to run a TV show. Wasn't in the budget. I mean, Tampa was $2,000, Miami was $2,000, Tallahassee was $1,000, Ocala was $1,000, Jacksonville was $2,000. There were different prices all around. That's how Vince went basically bankrupt there in the very beginning, was because he did that all over America. Mm-hmm. He did it in Georgia. He did it in Louisiana. He did it everywhere. He said, I don't need, and he already had USA, so I don't know why he wanted to go in and buy the local stations when he already had the USA Network and was nationwide. Mm-hmm. But he did. So between him buying the TVs and Crockett stealing all the talent, that was, we had no TV anymore. Without TV, you're doomed. And then without talent, you're doomed. So we had a double trying to keep Vince out of the towns and the talent from Crockett. There was no need to fight it anymore,
Dusty started the PWF. Mm-hmm. Memories of that?
Yeah, I knew it was going to be, again, without TV, without the cable television was so strong that once Channel 17 got a hold of everybody. If you didn't have stars from Channel 17, you just didn't draw. Mm-hmm. And then when USA also came along nationwide and you didn't have stars from USA, you just didn't draw. So all of a sudden, Dusty became the people had been used to seeing Dusty on Channel 17, on USA. Well, now all of a sudden, he wasn't even on TV anymore. But he was coming to your town to wrestle tonight. No, you didn't think he was a star, you wasn't going to go. Mm-hmm. Just the name Dusty Rhodes wasn't compelling enough to get people to come out and go to the wrestling matches because they couldn't see him doing anything on TV. They couldn't see interviews on TV. They weren't, oh yeah, I'm going to go see the Dream whip so-and-so or whatever. So that was a fast, fleeting moment in Dusty's life where he tried to run Florida. He tried to come home because he thought that was the best place he'd have a foothold in, but he had been gone too long and he had lost that edge, that Dusty Rhodes edge, and no TV, so it just didn't work.
That's how it just ended. That was it.
Yeah.
Wow. Your first impressions of Dustin?
No, I mean I started Dustin. Dusty called me in about 88, something like that, and said, Mike, he said, Dustin, I've tried to get him to go to college, and he wants to learn to wrestle. He said, I would really appreciate it if you would be the one to teach him. I want to send him to Florida. I want you and Kern I'd like you and Steve to, take him under your wing and teach him the industry and all that stuff. So, wow, sure, Dusty, He said, I'm sending him down with a couple $1,000 and, whatever. So Dustin lived in my office for about 6 months. I used to have to go in and take my keys and kick him out of, not just my office, but I mean my office room. The Sportatorium had a lot of offices, but he chose mine to live in. And his clothes and shit would be in my office. I'd have to gather all his stuff and go throw it where he's supposed to be sleeping. And because I had a little refrigerator and I had, stuff in there, I guess it was more livable for him. But he was had a brilliant career ahead of him. And just couldn't keep it together. I don't know if it was too much too fast, or he didn't get what he thought he should have, or he just, he met Terry, mm-hmm. and, beautiful lady, a couple years older than him. And I don't know if that divorce, a lot of times a woman can take a guy's spirit, and make him break their heart. Mm-hmm. And then a man isn't a man without the woman that he loves. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I haven't been around Dustin too much in the last years, so it was a shame. He was a hell of a talent. Oh my God. Mm-hmm. But you can only do so much. We're all just human.
Right.
We're all just human.
That's true. Do you think a territory could survive in Florida today?
With the right promotion and backing. Mm-hmm. Steve Kern has Florida Championship Wrestling. Mm-hmm. It's a company in Tampa. He's backed by WWE. Mm-hmm. He has the only wrestling school in the world mm-hmm. that's sending talent to WWE. So if they've done a pilot TV show, Dusty is the color guy and all that kind of stuff. If they can get back on TV, and Vince will send them John Cena, one of their stars, just one star a week if they book 3 or 4 or 5 towns, and the people could see a star off the WWE show mm-hmm. and a star off the local show. If it's done correctly, you'll never sell out the West Palm Beach Auditorium every Monday night anymore. That's gone. That's not ever going to happen. People have too many choices. They have too many restaurants, bars, cable TV. You can sit right at home and watch everything you could possibly want to see on TV. So, gas prices ridiculous. We have seen the heyday of live events that just aren't going to happen again. So it's going to be hard pressed to run a money-making territory off just the wrestling part of it. It's going to be hard to do. and not just because it's the nature of the beast, not because anybody's doing anything wrong, or not because the wrestlers aren't good enough. There's just a lot of competition. Like now in Tampa Bay, you got the Devil Rays, you got the Buccaneers, you've got the Lightning, you've got all these other professional sports. Where back in the 70s and 80s, wrestling, that was all there was. You know, the Miami had the Dolphins, but that was Miami. But now, I mean, every time a new restaurant chain opens, you're competing against them for the entertainment dollar. So there's just a lot more options and a lot more choices for people to do. And the wrestlers of today are not they don't tug on your emotional heartstrings. They do things off the top rope, and, you know, they big in muscle and everything, but they don't know how to motivate you to go every week and watch wrestling. And the guys, the teachers, like, you know, that could do that aren't around anymore. Mm-hmm. So it's a different era. There will always be professional wrestling. I don't think you can kill it. I mean, there'll always be some form of professional wrestling. So right now, Vince has got the big game in town, and there'll be your independent shows, and you'll have some decent shows and some bad shows, but there'll always be wrestling. There'll always be wrestling.
Why do you think that Florida Championship Wrestling still has the legacy it does? It still lives on.
Oh, I mean, just because of Eddie Graham, because every great professional wrestler came through Florida. Every world's champion. I mean, a lot of times world's champions didn't necessarily want to go to Alabama or want to go to Tennessee or want to go to someplace, but everybody wanted to come to Florida. When guys would get time off to go on vacation, they wanted to come to Florida. They'd all call Dad and say, hey, I'll be in Florida for a week. You need me to work a shop? Because then they could write it off their income tax. Oh, well, I had to go to Florida and wrestle in West Palm Beach. Tax deductible, the whole vacation, everything was. So we just had the gift of sunshine and pretty beaches and water and an area that people wanted to come to anyway. And then Dad always took advantage of that opportunity to have great wrestlers and good competition and Du Bois ranches and just everything that he did. You know, that's why it will forever be remembered. Forever.
Do you think that legacies? Do you think that Vince, with his libraries and tapes, does you think he's doing the legacy of Florida the right justice?
Yeah, the shows that I've seen, I thought were very good. He's very respectful. He's really a good guy, you know. And I had a ton of comment from wrestling fans here. I don't get the pay channel in Florida, so I haven't had a chance to see the finished product. I review, I look at all the shows and all that kind of stuff, and then do commentary. So I kind of get an idea of what they're doing, and they're really wanting to treat it correctly and not use it as a joke and to make it very serious. And I think from what I've looked at the run sheets and all that stuff, they've done a wonderful job. And I've heard nothing but good reports. Everybody's going, why don't they have more stuff? I mean, they haven't come out with anything new lately. When are we going to see more championship wrestling from Florida? You know, what's going on? What's this? What's that? So I had never had anybody say, you know, I saw it, but you know, I didn't really like it. Or everybody that said anything about it all thought it was great. So obviously the people that are doing the editing and picking out what they're using and everything are doing a good job.
Okay. How did you wind up in WCW as a road agent?
Dusty Rhodes.
Okay.
The wrestling was basically over in Florida, and I was out on the beach. My wife and I had split up, and I was sitting out on the beach. I think he was just jealous because I was living on the beach, hanging out, having fun, and he had work every day. Mm-hmm. And he called me one day. He said, hey, Mike, what are you doing? I said, James, I'm doing the same thing I was doing last week when you called. I'm laying out by the pool. I'm having fun. I'm playing. I'm doing what? He said, do you want to come to work? I said, come to work and what? I thought he wanted me to wrestle because at that time I was still in my 30s. I was only 38, I guess. But Jim Hurd, dumbass deluxe, he thought 38 years old was too old. But yet he wanted a fella with one leg. He wanted a this, he wanted that, he wanted all kinds of stupid things. Well, Jim Herd never wrestled. He didn't know nothing about wrestling. So here's a guy trying to run a wrestling company that didn't know anything about it. He was at one time had been a cameraman at a wrestling show in St. Louis and filmed some matches. Well, that doesn't make you a wrestling promoter, but that was another issue with Turner Company. That's a whole other story, though. But so I said, sure. So I came up and I talked to Jim Herd, and I said, I'd really think I could help as a wrestler, because he said, oh, the guys won't respect you. If they think you're just a wrestler, they won't respect you. If you're in the office, they'll respect you. I said, looked at him. I said, obviously, you don't know too much about wrestling. I said, because the fastest way to get respect in this business is to be a wrestler. Get out in the ring with them. And when they see that you can roll right with them and go, then when you say something or whatever, they're going to respect it. Otherwise, if you're just some suit walking around saying, do this, they're going to tell you to get lost. So anyway, but Dusty Rhodes called me, and I went up, and that's when I went to work as a road agent.
Working with Eric Bischoff.
Pain in the ass. When Eric Bischoff got his job because the kid that was in the Wonder Years, Jason Hervey, lied and wrote a bogus, what's the thing when you're going to try to get a job and you fill out a resume, a bogus resume. I talked to Bischoff when he got there. He was an okay guy, I said, man, you could be the next Gordon Soley. He looked good. He was the TV announcer. He was motivated. But this business and time really can disturb your brain and make you do crazy things. And the more he was around, Jim Ross locked him out of the TV room and wouldn't let him go in and do TV interviews if Jim wasn't there. And so he got to hating Jim Ross, and Jim Ross was battling with him, and just internal stupid things. Well, then Bill Watts is going to come save the day. We went through all the corporate people to run it. None of them could run it. So Bill Watts figures, shit, I ran Louisiana and Oklahoma. I can come in and run one. When Bill saw how broken it was and that there was no way that it was going to get fixed, the only way to fix it was fire everybody there, every wrestler, burn all the contracts, and start over again. Because, people were being paid stupid money, and they'd stub their toe and stay home for a month at a time. The big work at WCW was get a contract and don't come to work. Just get your check. So when Bill saw that he wasn't going to fix it, he then set out to get himself fired. If he'd have quit, he wouldn't have got his money. But if he got fired, they had to pay him for 3 years. Mm-hmm. He had a big corporate, I got to tell him, he's got some balls. He had a big corporate meeting with the heads of Turner. And he had a beautiful office with a great big balcony and all that kind of stuff. And he did everything. He would come in with Zuba pants and T-shirts, and in our list, our office code, no baggy pants, got to wear a tie, got to do this, got to do that, got to keep your image. You're walking through CNN Center, the media capital of the world, all this kind of stuff. He'd come in with sweatpants and Harley Davidson T-shirts and flip-flops, and he was doing everything he could. Horrible language in front of female executives and everything, and he was still, nobody had talked about firing him. The coup de grace was, he said, hang on one second, I'll be right back. In the middle of this big meeting, he walks out on his balcony and pees off the balcony with all the corporate executives sitting in his office. That got him fired. He was soon gone after that. Turner Corp says, we will never, ever, ever have another wrestling person run this program. That ain't going to happen. So everybody started submitting their resumes to get the job. Bischoff submitted a bullshit resume. He got the job. About the second day he's there, he steps, pokes his head in my office. He says, hey, Mike, come here and talk to me for a minute. Because I had, loaned him a gun at one time and talked to him and kind of was helping try to mentor him and talk about this and talk about that. We were buddies. I thought we were buddies. And so he brings me in his office and he says, what would you do if you were running this company? What would you change? Well, I'd already been talking to Hulk Hogan to get Terry to come work for us. Because at that time, Vince was in all that drug stuff the first time about steroids and everything. And Hogan was trying to separate himself from that. He didn't want a part of any of that mess. He was wanting to do TV shows, but he hated Bill Watts. So through Jim Barnett, I arranged for Terry to meet Ted Turner and be hired by Turner to do TV, to do that stuff, and just lend him to WCW for a pay-per-view or for a TV. He didn't need to be on every show, you know. That way he didn't have to answer to Bill Watts, didn't have to do any of that. Well, when Bill Watts got fired, then I said, and he hadn't signed yet, I said, you need to hire Hulk Hogan. And I've already brought him here. He's already made the meetings. He's in. With Bill being gone, it's a no-brainer. We were having a hard time trying to get big crowds for TV. Before I went to work for them, Steve Kern and I, Steve really spent a year going to Universal Studios, talking. And finally, I went over with him the last meeting, and they were going to give us our own studio. They were going to make us part of Universal. We were going to have wrestling shows, like 2 shows a day. And the crowd from Universal would filter in, they'd fill up the building, and we'd have a wrestling match, and they'd leave. I said, you need to go over, but Universal was going to pay us to do that.
Okay.
I said, you need to go over to Universal Studios. You need to get the same thing we were going to do, where you get paid, you've got a built-in audience for your TV, and all your TVs will look good. He went, wow, yeah, that sounds good. I said, at that time we would do like 2 or 3 pay-per-views and 3 or 4 clashes. Well, it cost the same amount to do a clash as it did a pay-per-view, except for we got no revenue from it. So I said, stop the clashes. I said at that time it was like, I want to say $250, $300 to do a clash, or it was the same thing to do a pay-per-view. I said, do a pay-per-view once a month. We get some. We're not out there, you know, doing it for nothing. I said, and if you use your TVs, we'll take the pay-per-views and we'll book it like we used to book Bayfront Center. We would use our TV in Tampa and around that area and build and create and build and create. Then we'd have the big blow-off at the Bayfront Center or Lakeland or whatever once a month. So I said, we'll use our TVs, we'll use all the stuff and create, and then once a month we'll have a pay-per-view. Instead of a big live event, we'll do a pay-per-view. So I was sitting in his office and he called Universal. Eddie Mansfield happened to be at Universal after Kern spent a year talking to these people. Then I went over for the final meeting and we ran into him at a 7-Eleven or something. He was trying to get some TV show or something like that. Well, he just happened to sit in on our meeting. A month after that, Kern went to work in Tennessee or someplace. And Dusty called me, and I went to WCW. Eddie Mansfield to this day still has wrestling at Universal Studios. When I went to work, and Kern went to work, because Eddie was sitting in the meeting, they thought he was like part of our company. He said, yeah, Mike went and did this, Steve's doing this, but I'm staying here. And he got the wrestling at Universal Studios. So Bischoff calls. They put Eddie Mansfield, and Bischoff had the speakerphone on. Now he thinks he's a big cool guy. Yeah, this is Eric Bischoff. I'm CEO of WCW. And Eddie was always a smart ass. He says, what was your name again? Eric Bischoff. Eric Bischoff. I don't believe I've heard of you. What is it that you're wanting to do? He says, well, I'd like to come over and you wrestle at your venue and do TV, stuff like that. And Eddie goes, no, I've already got wrestling and I've got wrestlers and I've got TV. I really don't need, and hung up on him. You could see the smoke coming out Bischoff's ears. He was so mad. I got up, I walked to the door, I looked over at him, and I said, Disney's right next door. Same theme park, same thing, but bigger. He said, oh yeah, I can really see pro wrestling and Mickey Mouse going together. A month later, we were doing TV at Disney. A month after that, Hogan was hired. A month after that, no more clashes. I gave Eric Bischoff his key to success of that company. And he just went crazy. Just
giving people stupid contracts. God, you talking about somebody that got drunk with power. He was a real jerk off. I have no respect for him in any way, and I hope you hear this interview, Eric, because you're a thief and you're no good. So that's a fact. He should never have been in the wrestling business. He single-handedly bankrupted WCW. I'm surprised he's not in prison. I'm surprised he's not in prison for corporate fraud.
Really?
Yeah.
It's that bad?
Yes.
And
Yes. Sting and Luger and Flair and everybody had the same music for 15 years. Eric Bischoff starts a music company and says, "Nah, we're not going to use that other music. We're going to rewrite everybody's music, and I'm going to give the contract to my music company." He was signing the checks.
There we go.
He was signing the checks.
Double dipping.
Poster, the window cards. We'd use the same window card company, printing company forever. He puts Buff Bagwell and his mother in the printing company business, gives them the contract to print all the cards for WCW. Gives one of his other Oriental buddies in Oregon or something like that the rights to sell T-shirts to Japan. When NWO came out, huge. Eric was selling the T-shirts to his buddy, or WCW, but Eric was running it. Eric was saying, yeah, sell them to him for $5. Yeah, do this, do that. Yeah, send $400,000 to the music company. Send $200,000 to the printing company. Do this, do that. He was okay and everything, sending money to himself. Companies that he owned part of. So Japan was sending the Japanese guy, his car dealer friend or something, and wherever it was, huge checks. And Eric and him were partners together. And it goes further than that. Kevin Sullivan was there through all that. I was gone. I'd had enough. I left. But Kevin was there. And I just don't see how some people have been able to make it through and not just gotten massive trouble. And he's just a dishonest, no good thief.
Oof.
From me to you, Eric. Jerk off.
Well, while we're talking about WCW, besides Eric Bischoff, was it a friggin' loony bin, like people said it was?
Yeah.
During that time?
Yeah.
Everybody was
Yeah.
what the frig they want?
I mean, the whole thing was get a big contract, play like you're hurt, and don't go to work. At one time, we called like the top 20 main event guys. 3 of them were working. 17 were sitting at home, and they're making $1 million a year, $800,000 a year, $700,000 a year. The weekly money that was going out for these guys was unbelievable. Unbelievable. The Mexican guys that were coming up with Conan and all that group, when there was like 30 Mexicans working, they were all making like $150,000 a year apiece. And I got a feeling if that was looked into, there was one check going to a Mexican promotion company that Eric Bischoff probably owned part of. So it was a zoo. It was the tail was wagging the dog. It was just it was insane. That's why the last couple of years I was there, I just withdrew from TV, didn't want to be. I went to the powerhouse and tried to teach young guys how to wrestle and work with Paul Orndorff. Paul was running the school. Paul started in my office in Tampa, and I didn't want to be around the TVs. I didn't want to be around the people. And that other dipshit they sent down there, Vince Russo from New York, I mean, he couldn't have booked a phone booth. We walked out of Kevin Sullivan, I worked out of the first booking meeting, and I looked at Kevin. I said, could that have been a joke, that booking meeting we just came out of? That guy don't know nothing about wrestling. Nothing. He's our boss. And that is when it started crumbling when Russo got there. And then it just progressively got worse. And then Bischoff got crazier, and Bischoff single-handedly bankrupted the company.
So even bringing Hogan over, nothing changed. It was
No,
still lunacy.
because here came Bill Goldberg.
Mhm.
And Goldberg was a natural phenomenon. He really got over fast in the first 6 months of his career. Kevin Nash got the booking job. I love Kevin. He's right on line with Buddy Rogers and some of the real thinkers, that keep everything stirred up, that never let anybody get better than them and or over better than them or whatever. When they had Bill Goldberg beat Hogan, and then Nash beat Goldberg. Now Hogan's been beat, Goldberg's been beat, and Kevin wasn't over that well. Kevin was the big guy, had been some, but they'd had NWO. He and Scott Hall were together. Scott was a talented guy, but Scott had got his brain in some difficulty, and then it was just Kevin. And Kevin had some knee surgeries and everything, and his mobility in the ring was getting, he was getting a little older, and he was having a harder time getting around. So when Goldberg beat Hogan and then Nash beat Goldberg, that just kind of sizzled everything off. It just kind of, nobody was over. Nobody really meant anything. Everybody was touchable, or it just washed it all. Everything was just a wash. People didn't care. He'd been beat, they'd been beat, he beat him, they beat him. Didn't have any importance anymore. And Goldberg, in an interview after winning the world's title, the announcer says, "And Bill Goldberg, you just won the world's title and you've done this. What's the biggest, most important thing in your career that you'll ever remember?" And Bill says, "The first time I ever walked out onto a football stadium wearing a professional football jersey." I couldn't believe he said that. He was a world's champion. And he's talking about his biggest day in his career was when he went out on a football field. That he didn't have a career. He played, that might have been his only game or something. Why not give the credibility to the company that's paying your bills, that's earning you a living? You're the world's champion. That wasn't a big day. So there was a lot of people up there that just didn't get it. They didn't understand. They just didn't get it. And then they killed it from within. It's
nuts.
Stupid.
Nuts. They don't get it.
Yeah.
Well, we're gonna stay with the controversy. We'll keep going. This is going good. There's an incident that we joked about all day today. The squeegee incident with you and a very nice man.
Yeah.
Sid Vicious.
Sid.
Wonderful human being.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree 100%.
Can you tell us a little about that whole incident? Because everybody heard there was other people involved in that. I don't know how people know that you were involved in the same squeegee incident.
Came back from, I don't know, Montgomery, Alabama or something. We just finished TV. Terry Allen and God bless Brian Pillman was there, and I was there. And they'd had a couple drinks and was kind of nodding off a little bit. And Sid had just left WCW and gone to WWF. So he's sitting over at the bar, and we hadn't seen him for, he's been gone for a couple months. And I just said, "Hey, Sid, how are you?" And went back, sat down. And Sid gets up, walks over, sits down, and commenced telling us what a chicken shit company WCW is, and everybody that works there is stupid, and WWE is the place to be, and just nah. Well, we all still work for WCW. We had pride in what we were doing. I didn't want somebody telling me that we were dumbasses or that their company sucked or anything else. So I just said, "Sid, why don't you go back over and tell the girl that story at the bar? She'll believe it. I'm not going to." He said, "You, Mike Graham, you're a loser. I've made more money in the last 2 months than you'll make here all year. You've spent your life, I've done this, I've done that." I looked across the table at him, stood up, I said, "Sid, what you said might be true. But I said, this loser that hasn't made as much money as you is just about to kick your ass." And he gets up out of the chair and he sticks his interview chin out. He could do a hell of an interview, but I wasn't buying it. He wasn't cutting an interview on a wrestling fan. I wasn't a wrestling fan. And I said, as I went around the table, he like dropped his arm and he said, well, if you want to beat up a guy with one arm, go ahead. I said, one arm? I said, shit, looks like you got 2 arms to me and they're 3 times the size of mine. Yeah, but, and he pulls his shirt sleeve up. He had a little Band-Aid on it. I ripped my bicep today. Oh, Sid, get out of here. Just go home. You know, don't come in here and insult us and then act like this. I said, just go home. I helped him put his windbreaker on. It was kind of cool. I helped him put his windbreaker on and everything. So he walks out the door. So I'm standing with my back to the door. I'm trying to get Brian up and Terry to get them to the room and all that kind of stuff. And from behind me, I hear, all right, Graham, I'm ready for you now. It's going to be an even fight now. I'm ready for you. I thought he was kidding. I turn around and look, he's got a squeegee, like you clean your window with, a squeegee in his hand. I looked at him and went, are you serious? He goes, yeah, and he's in the break, like he's in a position where he's going to move or fight or something. I walked over to him, I snatched the squeegee out of his hand, and I thumped him on the chest with it. I said, Sid, get out of here before I stick this up your ass. And I handed it back to him, and he took it and put his arms down. He walked around. I thought, well, Jesus, here's 6'8", 300 pounds. If he comes in with a tire iron or something and my back's turned, he could do some damage. I better pay attention this next time. So I walked out into the lobby to see what he was going to, if he was going to come back with something or what he was doing. And he had moved his car up to the front of the hotel so he could, I guess, beat me up with a squeegee and make the big escape. And when he saw me standing in the lobby, he starts going, I'm going to kick your ass, Graham. You ain't no good. I mean, like a temper tantrum that a junior high school cheerleader would throw or something. So he gets in his car and he drives off. I didn't think anything else about it. I get Brian up and Terry and get them to the bed and everything. And the next night we had a show in Charlotte. Now I went to the ring to wrestle Brad Armstrong. And when they rang the bell to start the match, that chant had started, squeegee, 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 and before long the whole arena's screaming squeegee. But how did these people find out? There was only 3 or 4 people in the bar. I didn't say anything. I didn't call them. I wasn't proud of what had happened. I was said, it was a bad night. He was drinking. I just kind of blew it off. But man, it went like fire through everywhere. And then shortly after that, he got fired from WWE, and Bret Hart is a very good artist, and he drew a drawing with a dozen red roses, me, Pillman on my shoulders, and Sid bent over and a dozen red roses hanging out of his derriere. That was in the dressing room, his dressing room the next night. Wow. I mean, the word spread, and I don't know how. To this day, I do not know how anybody found out about it.
Wow.
But they did, and it was unfortunate. It was unfortunate, and then he came back to WCW a couple of years later, and we got along well, and everything was fine. And he just was having a bad moment, or he was always didn't take pain pills, didn't drink, didn't do anything on the road. He trained, he worked out, he ate good, loyal husband, and all that stuff. And maybe if he had torn his bicep, maybe he took a pain pill, or maybe I was surprised that he was sitting at the bar. I'd never seen him sit at a bar before, so. I'd never seen him act that way, that rude and aggressive. But anyway, it happened. It was funny. Down the road we go.
That's it. Some wrestlers like Batista and others have had bad things to say about the Power Plant, which you were involved in. A lot of the guys said the Power Plant has no interest in training anybody. They just want to break guys down. What do you feel about that?
They couldn't have been talking about the Power Plant that I ran.
Yeah,
I mean, maybe one of the, because Batista wasn't even around
right
when I was running the Power Plant.
Right.
He hadn't even started in the business. I mean, the Power Plant has been closed since 2001.
Right.
And as far as the days of making people do 1,000 squats and push-ups and beating them up and all that, it's been over for a long, long time. So all we did was try to teach psychology and how to wrestle and try to give some people an insight into, I got every TV show that was ever done and would show it so everybody sit down the next day and watch it on a monitor. and pick and show, and that was good. No, I shouldn't have done that, and everything. So, I mean, yes, back when I started, and a lot of other people started, you got Hulk Hogan. First 30 seconds of his first workout, Hero broke his ankle, spit on him, kicked him. Oh, big muscle boy. Think you're tough, huh? Want to be a wrestler? When you heal, you'll come back. He healed and he went back. Hero taught him how to wrestle. So, I mean, yes, things were done in a very violent way years ago. Maybe they're done in some place like that now. I don't know. But that definitely wasn't happening at the power plant.
Were you there for the Orndorff-Vader fight?
I had just left.
Oh, so you missed it?
I just left. I had been gone about a month.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd been gone about a month. And Vader was a bully. You know, he was a bully and thought again, he was frustrated. He always thought he should be the world's champion. He thought he was the best. He thought he was this. He thought he was that. You know, Leon could be a good guy that could be just crazier than a shithouse rat too. And when I heard what happened, I had to laugh because Paul would always wear flip-flops in the dressing room before he put his boots on. And it's lucky for Vader he was wearing flip-flops, because after Paul punched him and knocked his ass out, he started stomping him. But fortunately, he just had flip-flops on and couldn't really hurt him, or he would have stomped him till he did brain damage. I mean, Paul's another badass.
Yeah.
I played football. He was the Brandon Bull. I mean, I played football junior high school. I was the guy that wrestled Paul Orndorff when he came down for his first match.
Wow.
When his a friend of his father was on the sheriff's department. Paul and I went to the University of Tampa together. He was just an awesome athlete that was hot-headed and would fly off the handle, and you know, I mean, so the wrestling business was perfect for him. But I was the guy that wrestled him his first tryout.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So, but yeah, Vader's very lucky that Paul had flip-flops on.
Squeegee, flip-flops. We're covered it all.
And Paul hit him Paul at that time had the neck atrophy and basically had one arm.
One arm, right.
Yeah, I mean, his one arm was real thin, but his other one was enough to beat Vader, you know.
What was the story with the uncensored match between Barry Darsow and Dustin Rhodes? Were you there for that? There was all controversy.
in the trailer?
Yeah, there was all controversy over that. Were you there for that?
Yeah, I was there. I was the road agent.
So what the hell?
When I got there, I looked at the area that they were going to be wrestling in, and I said, guys, this could be very dangerous. There was jagged things and sharp things and bars and stuff sticking out, and you got a truck driving down the road and public highway. The police didn't block cars or anything off. I mean, I said, this could be a very dangerous situation we got going here. And at that time, if anybody got hit in the nose or got an eye split or anything done, TBS wanted no blood on TV. They would just shut the match off. They didn't show any blood. I mean, and they had a helicopter. They spent a lot of money to do this match in the truck, which was my idea. Mm. And so I get out there and I went, wow. I said, if somebody gets hurt and somebody starts bleeding, we've got all this money in this deal. They might just pull it. They might not use it. So I said, try your best under these crazy ass circumstances not to get punched in the nose or punched in the mouth, or, you know, try not to start bleeding, because I don't want them to waste their money and have to can the match. Well, that didn't happen. And Bischoff Jerkoff, because I was the agent, called me in the office, and the day before my contract had come up, and I went in his office. I says, hey, Eric, my contract's up. You know, this is after I gave him the winning formula for how to save it. This is after I'd done all that. Mm-hmm. Well, he didn't want me around because he didn't want me to meet the other people and them to find out that he was a dumbass and that I had given him all the plans for success. Mm-hmm. So when I said to the TV engineer that was there, and I don't remember his name now,
I said, what happens if somebody starts bleeding? I mean, what are we going to do? And he says, we discussed it in a meeting and everything, and he said, I think it'll be okay. So, okay. Long story short, they were bleeding. I get called in the office, and there was some TV guys sitting around, and I told Eric, I said, Eric, I told everybody to be as careful as they could. I said, this is going to be a very dangerous situation. Plenty of things to get hurt on. I was concerned if anybody bled, that you would cut it off and not use it, and all the money would have been spent for nothing, and I didn't want that to happen. And he said, well, he said, just go home for a couple of weeks, let the smoke blow over, and everything will be all right. The day before, when I went in and asked for my contract, he said, well, I can't really give you a contract. He put his hand out. He shook my hand, and he says, all I can tell you, as long as I've got a job here, you've got a job here. You've done a good job. I went, gee, thanks, okay. And then the next day we did the video, and 3 weeks later, he had the chicken shit call me at home and said, oh, well, and they used all the footage. They didn't edit. They didn't waste any money. They didn't do anything. People are still talking about the match in the truck, and all that kind of stuff. So he was wanting to get rid of me to protect his own stupidity around other people. And Hogan always brought his entourage. He had Jimmy Hart. He had Eddie Leslie. He had 3 or 4 guys that he always brought in with him. So Bischoff fired me to keep me from talking to his bosses and to free up some money to help pay for the Hogan gang that was coming in. And it was just one of those things. That's that.
How difficult were the politics in WCW?
Oh, they were outrageous. I mean, they were absolutely outrageous. You couldn't say boo. You couldn't. We had a list of things that for interviews. You couldn't say this on an interview. You can't say I'm gonna whip your butt. You can't say this. You can't say that. You can't. Nobody. If you got any blood in the match that was canceled or just quit or don't shoot it. You couldn't do this. I mean, it was just stupid. About 2 or 3 weeks before the truck thing, Bischoff calls me and he says, "You got to come with me. We got a meeting with the heads. We're going to the North Tower. The wrestling office was in the South Tower. We had a meeting at the North Tower. I want you to come with me." It's okay. So we go in this room and holy shit, there's like 10 guys and there's these graphs on the wall starting in 1974. I want to say at Championship Wrestling from Atlanta. Started on TBS 74, 75, somewhere in there. And it had the months, and it had the ratings. The years, the months, the ratings. And it goes around the thing, and some college-educated dumbass, my dad always had a funny line. He said, "Kid," because I went, "Dad, I just don't want to go to college. I'm not a good student. I want to work. I want to get out in the field and work. I want to earn a living. I don't like school. Whatever." And he said, "Well, Mike, college isn't for everyone." He said, "And always remember this, if you send an idiot to college, you get a college-educated idiot back." So Ted Turner was a great guy. He was cool. We had a couple meetings, and he was just huge balls, would go out and tackle things that shouldn't have worked, and he made them work and everything else. Long story short, we're in this meeting, and all these guys that know nothing about the wrestling business, nothing whatsoever, probably didn't even watch it on TV, but they're the one basically controlling our company. If you graduated from college, you could get a job with Ted Turner. So we had a bunch of college-educated idiots in this big office. And they're saying, "Well, Mike, can you tell me why we're not doing we're doing 3.5s and 4s over here, and back there they're doing 10s and 11s and this and this and this?" I looked at him, Bischoff sitting there. I walked to the very end. I said, "Can anybody tell me who owned Championship Wrestling from Georgia from 1974 to 1977, or whatever the years were?" And they all went, "No." I said, "Fred Ward, Paul Jones, boom, 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 boom." They were all wrestling people. They had all wrestled. They all were wrestling promoters. They were doing the TVs. They knew what they were doing. Now, from 1978 to 19, can you tell me who won Championship? No. I said, Jim Barnett, Ole Anderson, Briscoes. I said, again, they're all wrestling people. They're running a wrestling company. They'd all been in the ring before. They knew what they were doing. Now, in 1989, can you tell me who owned the wrestling business? And they all looked at each other and they said, didn't we kind of buy it? And that's when the ratings started going shit. And they all said, didn't we buy it? Didn't that when Turner bought wrestling or whatever? I said, bingo! You're exactly correct. I said, and you people don't know anything about the wrestling business. Your own graph, your own chart tells you exactly why we are failing. Because you set the rules for us wrestling people to live by, and you don't know what you're doing. I thought Bischoff was going to jump right straight out of his chair. He was like, looking like shh, don't say anything, don't say anything. I went, I'm not going to take the heat for anything. We can't do anything. We can't do interviews. Nobody can do nothing. Anything at all that happened. We had human resources at every TV that we had to give the TV to the human resource guy and have him read it and okay it, that there was nothing that was sexually explicit. There was nothing that was violent. Nobody was going to say anything that might offend anybody. You couldn't say black. You couldn't say blue. You couldn't say green. You can't say this. You can't say that. And I went, Jesus, guys, you could take Mark Spitz and tell him to swim across the swimming pool, but if you put a 100-pound anchor around his neck, he can't swim. So when I told everybody, the heads of all the companies, that they needed to keep their nose out of our business, that didn't go over real well. So,
yeah. Hall and Nash.
Great team.
More chaos?
Oh, well, they were popular and big and successful and everything in New York. They came to WCW, and I was gone at that time when they got there, because they came after Hogan was there, and basically it looked like the WWE had come down and taken over WCW. There was the three biggest stars from the WWE are now on WCW TV. So New World Order, everything. I mean, it was new, it was exciting, but they were seeing WWE and WCW on the same TV show. Mm-hmm. But wrestling fans know a lot of people have demons and issues, and Scott Hall started his wrestling career in my office. I mean, he was from Orlando. I've known him from day one. God, if I got to pick one guy that had a big natural body that could move, that was graceful, that was muscular, that just had everything going for him, it'd have been Scott Hall. He had it all. He had all the tools, and he reminded me of a story last night. He said, remember that night in Nassau? You looked at me and said, Jesus, if I could just put my brain in your body, I could make $1 million. Mm-hmm. And he said, I'll split it with you. I said, it's a little more complicated than that. But I wasn't there. So I imagine there was Scott being the nutty. He's very cut and dry, to the point. I'm sure he was saying things that people didn't want to hear. Nash getting more and more involved in the office and that kind of stuff. And like I say, Nash is always thinking about himself. He wants to keep himself good. He wants to keep himself over. He wants to keep himself in the power seat. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, if you can do it and the company is successful and it's making money and all that. So just a lot of, and Hogan, Terry's always been in control of his destiny. And so you had a lot of power people struggling in a company that was already struggling. So the guys at the North Tower telling the guys in the South Tower what they need to do and how they need to do it, and they didn't know. So it all just started crumbling and collapsing from all sides, from the wrestlers to the office to the thievery to just everything. It just all fell apart.
So I guess it sounds like you were very surprised when they went out of business.
I was in shock that it stayed in business. I couldn't believe it. I'm going, wow, they must have a lot of money because they sure waste enough of it.
Wow. That's crazy, right?
Yeah. I had no clue. None of them had any clue how to run a wrestling company.
There's a story told many times that you threatened to slash Chris Benoit's throat, and he used that as an excuse to get out of his contract. Have you ever heard that before?
Oh, I've heard it.
What are your thoughts? This is not a PG show we're doing, so don't worry about it.
Well, it's public knowledge that Benoit started having an affair with Nancy, Kevin's wife. Mm-hmm.
Kevin would be in the ring wrestling, and Benoit would have her out being romancing her and all that kind of stuff. Absolutely insulted Kevin in the worst way you could insult someone by doing something like that in the workplace. Everybody else knew, and pride and everything. Benoit did about as bad a situation and Nancy as you could do. Okay. With that being said, Kevin, when he found out about it, never went and beat Benoit up. Never did nothing. He left him alone. And I asked Kevin, because Kevin's violent. He's violent. I said, Kevin, how'd you get over? God, I got nuts. I don't know if I could have handled it or not. And he said, Mike, I lost my wife. I lost my brand new home on Daytona Beach. I lost almost all my money. I didn't want to lose my job. If I said boo to Chris Benoit, I'd lose my job. And I didn't. That's all I had left. If I would have done that, she would have beat me. I'd lost everything. I went, that makes sense. I get it. So he never bothered Chris Benoit. He never did nothing. Nancy is a shit disturbing bitch. She had a real dark, evil side that unless you knew the family, you didn't know existed. So she was stirring Chris up all the time. Kevin's going to get you. He's not the kind of guy to let you do this. So every time you'd go home, Nancy was yapping, keeping Chris wired up. When Kevin Sullivan got the booking job, I called him the Band of Midgets. Benoit, Dean Malenko, Perry Saturn,
Eddie Guerrero.
Eddie Guerrero. They all went to our boss. What the heck was another TV? Bill. Nice guy. He was an accountant. How they thought he could run wrestling? He was the accountant for WCW. How are you going to run wrestling as an accountant? But he was a nice guy. He tried. He was polite. He was nice. They go to him and say, we can't trust our careers in the hands of Kevin Sullivan. And because Mike Graham is his friend and a road agent, we want Kevin fired and we want Mike fired. Just because.
Mm-hmm.
So the guy, Bill Bush was his name. So Billy says, well, he said, either fire him or we're going to New York. So Bill said, well, we're talking to you, trying to talk you out of this. Do you do any good? No. You got to be fired or we're leaving. Bill said, I guess you're going to be leaving then because I won't be threatened. And I'm not going to fire someone for no reason. He said, I can't fire them. What have they done? They haven't done anything. Can't just fire somebody for the heck of firing them. So Bill comes and tells me and Kevin. We're in Cincinnati. We're in Cincinnati, Ohio. And and so he comes and tells us that they want us fired just because they can't trust Kevin because of his relationship with Nancy, and he never got back at Benoit, and that because he was the booker, he was going to ruin his career and do all stupid. And Kevin had nothing but respect for Benoit in the ring. He didn't agree with what he had done personally, but as far as in the ring, he was good, and it was no problem. So I was livid. So I walked out of the dressing room, and I found Benoit in the dressing room. I said, you come with me. We got to have a talk. I walked him out in the middle of the arena where nobody else was around. And I said, I just had a talk with Bill Bush. I said, Kevin has done nothing ever but compliment your work and say what a great guy you are in the ring and want to give you a push and thinks, that you could make money and all that kind of stuff. I said, me, I don't think you'll draw a dime. But Kevin does. Me, if you'd have taken my wife and my money and humiliated me in the workplace in front of all my friends, and if you'd have done to me what you did to Kevin Sullivan, I said, I'd beat your ass every time I saw you. Every day. Every time I saw you, you'd get an ass whipping if you'd have done that to me. Because I said,
It was wrong. You shouldn't have done it. It was wrong. And I said, but now you're trying to take my job because I'm Kevin's friend? You didn't bang my old lady. You didn't embarrass me. You didn't do anything to me. But I'm Kevin's friend. You want me to get fired? That takes food and money from my family now. And you're doing it just because you're spiteful. I said, if you mess with me, I'll cut your head off. I'll put it on a stick in your front yard so all the neighborhood kids can come throw rocks at it. I said, I'm not Kevin Sullivan. I don't care about losing my job. I don't care about anything else. If you mess with my livelihood, I will come get you. Now you take that back and figure it out. And he looked at me. JJ and I was talking about that this morning. He runs back to the back. Hour later, JJ comes and gets me. He says, oh, Mike, I can't believe. And he was kind of laughing. He said, I know you did it. I'm not even going to ask you if you did it. I know you did. I said, you know I did what, JJ? I just got a call from Human Resources. Benoit called him and said that he had to leave here immediately because you threatened his life. I just looked at JJ and kind of smiled. I said, you know, that's a bunch of crap, James. I said, did I say I would beat him up if he had taken my wife and humiliated me like he did Kevin? Yeah. Said he's trying to take my job, so of course he's going to talk trash about me. But did I say I was going to kill him? No, I never said that. So he said, well, you got to call the lady at the Human Resources. So I had to get on the phone, I had to call her, I had to explain everything to her. And meantime, they all left, and I looked at it as though we saved the company. Their salaries combined was almost $3 million, and they never drew a dime. I got the minute-to-minute reports from all the TVs. People were changing the station when they were coming on. Never drew a dime. So I kind of laughed when they left. I didn't care.
Mike Graham, Mike, we're going to continue on Chris Benoit. You know, horrible tragedy happened to son, whole style.
To everybody.
Yeah.
To everybody. It was a horrible tragedy,
Right.
period.
Did you, knowing him and seeing how he was, did you see this kind of him in his head, or it's coming, or?
No, I hadn't been around Chris since he went to New York. But, I mean, I watched Nancy grow up, or his wife. She sat on the front row of Orlando for years and years when she was a little girl with her mother. Then she got married. Then there was her and her husband and the mother. And, you know, when Kevin first started going out with her, and I knew her from day one, and she had, like a lot of people do, I'm not picking on anybody, but she had a pretty dark, evil side to her. And she stabbed Kevin in the chest, tried to stab him in the chest with a butcher knife when they were married. Cops came and arrested her. Kevin went and got her out of jail, and cops said, what are you doing? He said, she's my wife. I can't have her arrested in jail. I said, well, you could have been in the morgue right now, because if you wouldn't have got your arm up, it would have been more than the tip of the knife going in your chest. You'd have been stabbed. So in any relationship, any husband and wife, any guy and girlfriend, anything, emotions and life and stress and just things can get crazy. Well, she, like some women I've known, knew how to really piss a man off. And she liked pushing those buttons, you know. She liked pushing the buttons. She liked making someone angry. So all anybody can do is guess, you know. The people that know what happened are all dead. But I don't see Chris as a murderer. I mean, an intentional, like a premeditated thing, other than, and I think it sucks because he did what he did to his little boy. He never hurt anybody. He never did anything. He didn't deserve what he got. And in being married, and relationships and that kind of thing, I think probably Chris got in an argument and maybe pushed Nancy or did something and she hit her head. Or I think if I have to guess at it, and that's all we can do is guess, you ask my opinion, I think she accidentally died. I don't think he meant to kill her. But once she was dead, now insets the heartbeat, the, oh my God, you know, I'm going to go to prison. I I've killed my wife. What am I going to do? What am I going to do this? What am I going to? Because it took him a day to think about this, so it wasn't an instantaneous thing going off in his head. And I don't know, but I've heard that the little boy text messaged one of his friends saying that his mommy was in the room next door, dead.
Really? Oh.
So I think in Chris's confusion, I couldn't even imagine what was going through his mind at that point, you know. But I think he thought, who's going to take care of my boy? You know, is he going to go to foster home or what? You know, I just don't know. But to think and do the thing with the little boy the next day, and then himself, he thought about it and planned that part of it. But I think it all started as an accident. I think it got way, way blown out of hand. I don't really think Chris was an intentionally evil person. You know, I called him out. He wouldn't fight. You know, that somebody that's going to intentionally kill somebody, I think if you pushed him hard enough and said enough to him that they'd come out and fight. Well, he wouldn't fight. Mm-hmm. So it was a horrible incident, and it's too bad the little boy had to be there, and he never had a chance. He never hurt anybody. He didn't do anything. You know, that's the outcome of it is, I think, is just really sucks that the little boy had to be involved. You know, but I don't think Chris was a murderer. I don't think he did anything intentionally other than kill the little boy. He meant to do that. He meant to kill himself. I think it all started as an accident. Mm-hmm. It just got really nasty. And it's too bad. They were young. They had their whole lives ahead of them, you know. And crazy things happen.
And we started off today talking about the business, and we've been in a long doldrum of the dark side, if I want to say, with all that's going wrong, and Eric Jerkoff, and your dad, and now this crap. Let's get back to close up this thing with more about wrestling.
Okay.
How we finish up. You have a great mind for the business, so that's where we go. Do you think another company could work now besides TNA and WWE?
The main problem with trying to get another company is no different than Walmart, is no different than the Hyatt Hotel, is no different than anything. Employees. Where are you going to get another 100, 150 wrestlers that can go on TV and compel people to come and watch them wrestle? They're all gone. You know, you take a half a dozen guys at WWE that are obviously compelling. They have a good business. They're making money. They're successful. Everything's going on. Well, where are you going to get the next group of those guys if you don't? To get started, you got to get started somehow. So you'd have to try to steal something from TNA or steal some guys from WWE, or you couldn't just create stars that are good enough to go on television and do the job they need to do. So with again, talent and employees, wrestling business is no different than the car business or any grocery store or anything else. Employees have always been a problem. And management and employee conflict and struggle, cost, gas prices, television, costs now to produce a TV show, insurance has gone crazy. It would be hard. I'm not saying it would be impossible, but I'm just saying to do it in a national level, like WWE, like TNA, it would be very difficult to do. Television would cost you a fortune. So you'd have to have somebody with really, really deep pockets. You'd have to probably have a wrestling school, a territory, not a school. You can teach a monkey how to jump off the top rope. How many times have you been to see the Ringling Brothers Circus? Once or twice, maybe? Mm-hmm. And they got the best jugglers, the best acrobatics, the best guys in the world. You just don't go. You see it one time, you're done. Mm-hmm. So you'd have to have a territory for a year and get people out in public and get them in front of a crowd and try to stimulate their mental computer
and talk to them and coach them and mentor them and do everything before you could ever think about opening a wrestling company, because there just isn't enough guys. There isn't any talent out there that's not already tied up. If they're out there, they're under contract. They're not floating around looking for a job.
Well, they're no good.
Yeah, or they're worn out. They've been seen for 3 years on WWE, or they've been seen for 4 years at TNA, or they're just, everything has a shelf life, and the talent that's out there has no more shelf life.
Mm-hmm.
Or they've never been on the shelf to start with, and they need to learn. But to start a company like that, it'd be very difficult.
How come you haven't worked with TNA yet?
Gosh, I mean, I know the Jarretts, and you know, my dad would go to Tennessee, and Jarrett, the Jeff's dad, they were very good friends. I used to work for Jarrett some in Tennessee, and you know, they seem to run everything and do everything, and I haven't been looking for a job. I don't guess they've been looking for anybody to try to attempt to help them. So I went by a couple times when Dusty was there just to say hi, you know, and talk to some old buds and stuff like that. But you know, I'm very happy, very content living life and doing what I'm doing. I don't need a job, and the responsibility is huge. You've got a lot of people looking up to you to earn them a living, to be the creator, to find and help, and you know, just they never needed me, and I never needed them.
Okay. Thoughts on Vince Russo's booking?
I think we already went through that. He was an idiot.
Have you seen anything in TNA?
No.
Of his booking, so you really don't?
No. I know unless he learned something when he was at WCW, he sucked. I swear to this day, Vince sent him to WCW to put it out of business, to help put it out of business.
Really?
Because he was so stupid that he just couldn't do anything right. Now, maybe he learned. I mean, that was 2001. So, I mean, it was 7 years ago. So maybe he's learned, maybe he's changed, maybe and Jerry Jarrett was a brilliant booker. Jerry in Memphis and everything, huge money. They still got local TV. I mean, that's a territory that survived through it all. They're still there. That was Jerry Jarrett. You know, he's very sharp and knows his stuff. So Vince might have gotten that ego crap out of his head and finally sat down and learned. Or if Jarrett is in control, which I believe he is, then when he listens to Vince's ideas, is Vince Russo booked TNA?
Yeah, he's head booker.
Oh, okay. Well, then maybe they work good together. And Vince, but when he was at WCW, he wasn't going to listen to anybody. He didn't want anybody's input. He thought we were all stupid. So, and he thought we were stupid. We thought he was stupid. So it was a standoff.
There we go. How important is it for Vince McMahon to recognize your father in the Hall of Fame?
Oh my God, that was like the coup de grace. That was so cool. When I got that phone call, I was almost in shock. You know, you got to be kidding me. He wrestled there in the 50s, you know, 59, 60. And it was just, in my career, you might say, to be part of a production and just to see how the wrestling business is today from the inside out, and to have Vince McMahon think and know that my father was one of the true founders and creators and formers of the wrestling industry of today was really awesome. You know, I say I was in shock. I was like a little kid in a candy store when they called, you know, and they said, "Would you accept the award?" Yeah, when? What do I got to do? You know, do I need to pay you to do this? You know, yeah, whatever it takes. It was like the final stage of my dad's career. He just was upstairs watching it. He wasn't here.
Is it true that you got $1 million for the Florida Tape Library?
You'd have to ask my accountant.
Wait, hold on. Can I call him? Does he have speed dial? Enough said.
You'd have to ask my accountant. See what? Yeah, you'd have to ask my accountant.
What, Goldstein and Goldstein?
Yeah, I don't know.
All right. Thoughts on Vince McMahon?
You know, Vince has pissed a lot of people off because he broke stride. He did things, so did Sam Walton. So did people in every big, huge company today just do things differently. If they played football in a dirt field with no cheerleaders and no big fancy stadiums and everything, it wouldn't be football. So Vince took 30, 40 years of wrestling and knowledge and fan base and everything else and just changed it to a different situation. Did he put a lot of people out of business? Absolutely. Does Walmart put a lot of people out of business? Absolutely. Bottom line is succeed. We're all here trying to succeed. We all don't really get concerned with who gets buried who gets outrun in the race or who, whatever. We're all very competitive and we all want to be the best. And Vince has shown that he is a very smart businessman. He's not afraid to get out and scrap and lay his nuts on the line for something that he believes in. He's been extremely polite and nice to myself and my family and, my dad and everything. He's been very good to, Barry Windham and different people that have had medical issues that he helped hugely. So he's got a good heart. He's a great business guy and he's been very successful. What can you say? That's a fact. That's the way it is. Yes, did he help put Championship Wrestling from Florida out of business? Correct. Did he help bankrupt all the other wrestling companies in America? Correct. How many mom and pop grocery stores and hardware stores did Home Depot? How many hardware stores did they put out of business? So that's just either you keep up the pace, you set out and run harder, or you get left behind. That's just the way it is in anything.
What is the problem with the business today? What isn't the problem?
The problem with the business. Well, the problem with the business today is there really isn't any business. The business, the way it is run today, is being very successful. So, yeah, in the eyes of an old timer, you could say, the problem with business today is there's not a territory in Texas and Georgia and California and Louisiana and this and this and this and this, but who's to say those territories would still be here anyway? So, problem with the business today, you've got a lot of Vince has surrounded himself with a lot of talented guys. Ricky Steamboat, Arn Anderson, Barry Windham, Mike Rotundo, Michael Hayes. He has taken a nucleus of guys that know a lot about the wrestling business and is working with them to take what he believes, what Vince believes, and put it in a wrestling kind of content to merge the two together. And he's doing a very good job about it. It ain't broken. If the car, if it ain't broken, don't fix it. And in his world, it ain't broken by any stretch of the imagination.
What do you think is lacking in the independent wrestlers and indie wrestling today?
I really haven't been to any independent shows. A lot of people, because of the allure, because of the magic of professional wrestling, because of the wanting to do it or something, I think there are a lot of young kids that are 110 pounds that will never have any chance of being a wrestler, that don't look like a wrestler, don't talk like a wrestler, don't know how to wrestle, have nothing going, and they're wearing blue jeans and sneakers or whatever, and they're jumping off the top turnbuckle, and they're just doing stupid things. And wrestling fans, I think, go maybe to some independent shows, and they see a lot of these people that just have no chance or no idea about what they're doing. And when you went to a wrestling show 25 years ago, everybody that went to the ring in Florida, everybody looked like a professional. They all had their tights, their boots, they were in shape, they trained, they tanned. There was no kids wearing hats sideways and blue jeans on and that looked like they could just walk in off the street and got in the ring.
Mhm.
Be like, do you think the attendance would go down in football stadiums if they let everybody wear, if they wanted to put a T-shirt over their shoulder pads and maybe wear a number, or, wear sneakers instead of boots, and don't wear a helmet, wear your necklaces, and, I think it's lost a lot of its professional intimacy, because a lot of people in the independent circuit are trying, but they just don't kind of know what to do, So I would say professionalism is probably the main thing that hurts the independent shows. And no teachers, no coaches. And if you put one guy that doesn't know anything against another guy that doesn't know anything, when the match is over, they're going to come out and neither one of them learn nothing. So nobody's going to get any better. You've got to wrestle. You've got to be able to see. You've got to be able to understand and have somebody talk to you that knows about the wrestling business to explain why, how, when, where. And without that, you're just going to fumble around and do 3 backflips and fall through a table. You ain't going to do nothing.
That's that. In your career, we're going to finish this up now with basically all about you and things like that. In your career, who did you find that was overrated and underrated?
Overrated and underrated. I would say Lex Luger was probably the most overrated guy, that made more money, that did everything for somebody that really didn't have much talent. And probably Barry Windham, underrated. Because like I said, when I did the TVs at WCW, I used to get the minute by minute ratings. I knew who the fans at home were watching. I knew when they were going to get a beer out of the refrigerator, or a cup of coffee, or candy, or spank the kid, or whatever. And every time Barry Windham came on TV, the ratings had a little spike. They just did. Every time Booker T came in on TV, the ratings dropped. Every time the band of midgets came on TV, the ratings dropped. When the Mexicans came on TV, the ratings dropped. Goldberg, they did good. Hogan, they were huge. Barry Windham, they were huge. Different guys in different positions, but across the board, I think Barry Windham was probably the most underrated. For Barry Windham never to be the world's champion was insane. Insane.
Okay, that's a question I had personally. Why was he never a WWE or NWA heavyweight champion of the world?
Barry was Barry. Barry is crazy. I mean, not crazy. Barry, he sometimes liked to disappear for a day or two at a time and go out hunting or fishing, or he never took it. The business was so easy to him, and it came so natural that he never really looked at it as work. It was always play. So if he was playing at work and having a good time and making money, then if he wanted to take a couple of days to take his family and go someplace, he just did it. So it was, he just, and I don't think the promoters realized, and I know at WCW, Eric Bischoff never looked at a television rating. The TV people, they looked at the 5-minute stuff, you know what I mean, or the quarterly ratings, but they never got a minute-to-minute sheet and sat down with a run sheet and the minute-to-minute report and looked at the names and looked to see. And they had all that available to them and they never used it. I went, holy smokes, this is so easy. And you just write a little thing. Yeah, rating came up, rating went down, rating came up. And you do that for a month. Doesn't take a genius to book the thing. You get 4 weeks in a row, somebody's rating came up, you put them on TV. Your rating don't come up, you're out of here. But no, nobody ever looked at any of that. They just kept writing down names and paying paychecks and just kept going on. The well was too deep. They never figured they'd run out of money.
Till they dried it out.
Yeah. Well, when Turner sold a bunch of the assets of TBS to Microsoft or one of the big computer companies. And the computer company wanted no sports. They didn't want baseball. They didn't want wrestling. They didn't want basketball. They didn't want nothing. They weren't into sports. They were into computers and the TV business, but they didn't want to put up with any aggravation from any athletes. So that combined with Bischoff's theft, total confusion, and everything else going on was the ultimate downfall. A lot of things bankrupted that company.
Do you enjoy the nostalgia shows you do?
Yeah, it's fun. Yeah, I enjoy going and seeing and talking to the guys, like seeing Michael Hayes and JJ and Kevin and, people that I rode up and down the road with, I fought with in the ring. I did everything to kind of hear what the fans are saying today, about who they like and what they like and what's going on in their life and all that kind of stuff. And, do 1 or 2 a year is kind of fun, kind of gets me out of the house and kind of keeps me in touch with different people. And it's very polite and everyone's always very nice. And it's good. I enjoy doing them. Would I want to do one every day? No.
Yeah.
But, a few a year is good.
Who was your favorite and least favorite opponents?
I sat down one time. I've had like 18,962 matches or something. I mean, that's a favorite opponent, and that's such a hard question because I had a ton of fun and a lot of great matches with a lot of great guys. From Sullivan to Ray Stevens to Nick Bockwinkel to Ric Flair to Harley to Terry Funk. Everyone had a different thing, and it was great working with all of them. As far as least favorite, Angelo Mosca was just a big, stiff, clumsy guy. He got an attitude in the ring, and he would just sometimes do things that didn't make any sense, and big nasty, but Angelo was Bruiser Brody. Brody'd sucker punch you. He'd try to hurt you. He'd drive a knee in your back or do something when you was sitting down. I didn't like, because you always had to be, and he was big, something bitch, and in shape too. I went through my career at 200 pounds. If he'd have been my size, he'd have been working at a car wash somewhere. The only reason a lot of those guys made it through was God's gift of size. I wasn't gifted with size, so I had to use my brain and intelligence and everything else to get through. So Mosca could be very difficult, and I didn't look forward to going because I knew I wasn't going to have a good match. And Brody was difficult. I knew he'd try to hurt you if he got a chance. God bless him. He didn't deserve what he got, but he was awkward. I don't know. I enjoyed the business. I enjoyed my life. I enjoyed every night I went to the ring. Never really sat down and said, "Oh God, I don't want to wrestle this guy. I don't want to do this." That just never. I always found a way to have a good match and have fun with it. And didn't worry, didn't think about the negatives, just the positives.
Is there do you watch it all? Wrestling now or not really?
Occasionally, if I'm channel surfing between TV shows or whatever, I might watch a segment or a part of a match or something like that. But to sit down and watch a whole show, no, I haven't done that.
So you don't even know if anybody has the it that we talked about earlier.
Oh, John Cena. I mean, he's done very good. He's kicked it in. Batista looks good, athlete, can interview. Yeah, I mean, there's some guys that I've seen that have it that people like or people dislike that seem to have done really well. Kurt Angle, he and Jack Briscoe are probably the two best amateur wrestlers turned pro in history, and Kurt was probably a better interviewer than Jack. Jack was never a great talker. Kurt could talk. Jack was just unbelievable in the ring. But he was a 3-time national Big 8 champion. He won every amateur wrestling thing you could win. And then went on to be a great professional wrestler. And Kurt, probably those two guys are the two best amateurs turned pro in the history of the wrestling business. So Kurt had it. There's some guys that CM Punk. You know, he's got a good presence. He looks good. He's put weight on. He's put on probably 40 pounds since I wrestled him a few years ago. I saw him on TV the other night and I went, holy smokes, is he got him? He's starting to fill out, you know? But yeah, there's a lot of guys. There's a lot of guys that have been given an opportunity that they wouldn't be making money. They wouldn't be drawn. They wouldn't be selling out big buildings the way they do if they didn't have guys that could draw money, they could do interviews, they could wrestle, they could do stuff. It's just today, when my dad was doing it, it was, like I say, it was good versus bad. It was big versus small. It was rich versus poor. There were two ends of the yardstick. Today, sometimes it's like they're just two guys in the ring wrestling. And I guess if I watched it, I would better know some of the personalities. But watching the match, you can't tell if it's good versus bad. You can't tell because everybody's punching, everybody's kicking, everybody's throwing each other over the top rope. Both guys are doing the same thing. So no one is set out as they're just, I don't know. It's just difficult now to know if you're going to root for the good guy or the bad guy. You don't know who anybody is because they're both doing the same things. Both people are pulling everybody's hair. Both people are blinding each other. Both people are doing all the things that everybody does. So kind of like just watching two guys in the ring doing stuff. You got nobody to feel sorry for, or nobody you want to cheer for because, they're both, he stuck his finger in his eye, he pulled his hair. Okay, they're even. He did that, they did that. Okay, they're even. God dang it, man. He could get out if that guy quit pulling his hair. Oh, he was almost over him and he stuck his finger. I mean, there's none of that emotional tie. There's no emotional attachment anymore. It's just tit for tat, tit for tat, tit for tat, tit for tat, tennis. No emotional bond is happening anymore.
Do you ever want to write a book?
I don't know. My wife keeps saying, and people that I know said, "Oh, Graham, I don't know how to write it. I'm not going to sit down and write a book." I guess nobody'd believe it. A lot of things I wouldn't want to write because there's a lot of personal issues with people that are all still alive, that are all still good. That it's nobody's business. They know, I know, we know, and I'm not going to write things that could hurt someone's feeling or, mess up someone's life or just anything. I don't need it. No. So I've thought about it. Like I've laughed and said, nobody'd believe it. I'd tell somebody stories and they'd go, "You're out of your mind. You didn't run a car 180 miles an hour through 6 fence poles and a telephone pole 6 feet off the ground and walk away from it. That's a bunch of crap, You didn't get drunk and beat up 2 guys over there and walk down the street, pee in the window and do this and do that. You just don't do that." Well, I did. My life has been quite wild and crazy. And some of the things I'm not really proud of. And but for most part I am. I never really bothered anybody that didn't need to be bothered. Never went out and picked a fight with anybody. Never backed down from a fight with anybody. And then all of a sudden when they found themselves getting their asses whipped, they were calling lawyers and, "Oh God, Mike Graham, professional wrestler, did this and that." I mean, just stupid stuff. But that would be hard to write a book. It would be very, very hard. I mean, I'd have to sit with someone, I guess, like yourself or a machine or something, because I just couldn't sit down and write stories. I have a adult attention deficit. I can't focus on something long enough to sit down. That would be weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. So, I like riding motorcycles and playing in boats and looking at good-looking ladies and eating and having fun and going to the gym. And I got too much living to do yet to sit down and write a book.
So tell us in closing, what's going on in your life today? Where you working? What are you doing? Just besides the women and
I know. I started buying real estate when I was 19. My dad told me so much. He taught me and prepared me so well for a life. And when he was telling me, I had no idea what he was talking about. I was 16, 17, 18 years old. And I still remember simple things that he would say. And you go, wow, how did he know that? You know, and all of us kids always think our parents are dumbasses anyway. We think we know more than them. But he said, you know, time's on your side. He said, you're young. Start buying real estate now. It's never going to get any cheaper. And he called every house or every individual real estate deal was a forced savings account. Said you got money in the bank and you get a wild hair in your house, you can just go get the money and spend it. If you got a building sitting there, you got to advertise it. You got to think about what you're going to do. You got to find somebody to buy it. So they're forced savings accounts. And so I started buying real estate when I was 19. Kevin Sullivan and I, as a matter of fact, bought our first properties together over in Daytona Beach in 1972. And so I wound up at, 50 years old with dirt everywhere and continued buying some. My wife and I just finished 5 new homes up north of Clearwater. And of course, the housing market took a crap. Everybody's dealing with that. But Dad always said, don't ever leverage one to try to get the other one. Every deal has to stand on its own. So every house that I've got, I just put mortgages on, put renters in them. Renters are paying the mortgage. So I'm not out of pocket nothing. And when the economy gets better, I'm going to have an unbelievable inventory that, I'll be good. Everything's good. So just developing real estate and traveling and enjoying my grandbaby when I get a chance to see her, and playing in boats, motorcycles, cars, you name it. I'm out doing it.
All right. In closing, what do you want to say to fans of Mike Graham?
Thank
Eddie
you
Graham?
very much for your support through all of the years. You've been wonderful. You've given me the opportunity to be here today.
How about Eddie Graham? Fans of Eddie Graham?
Same thing. My dad lived for the wrestling fan. He wanted nothing more than every person that was in every building or watched any TV show, if they thought it was real or not real, he wanted them to know he was real. He wanted, if the ticket was $5, he wanted to give them $10 worth of wrestling. He loved the wrestling fans. He always signed autographs. He always was very respectful because they're the ones that allow us to do the things we do. They're the ones that pay our bills. Without wrestling fans, we'd all be broke. We'd all be doing something else. I don't know what I'd be doing, but without the fan, we're out of luck. And he realized that at a very young age, and he always had time, signed autographs, did everything, was always very respectful and very nice and very good to his fans.
And if you're a fan of Eddie Graham, Mike Graham,
you got your money's worth.
You sure as hell a fan of Florida Championship Wrestling. So what do you want to say to those fans?
Just, kind of the same thing. Look forward to Championship Wrestling from Florida is coming back on TV. Steve Kern is producing the show. Dusty Rhodes is the commentator. And there's a lot of young, great athletes that are going to be going to work for WWE. So it's fun to see somebody now that a year or 2 years from now might be the next World's Heavyweight Champion. So watch for Florida Championship Wrestling.
And you heard it here on RF Video and Mike Graham. Thanks, Mike. You were a pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah.